Welcome to Nightshift Horror. Before we check in tonight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now get comfortable. The night shift is about to begin. I found the last form at 6:47 a.m., right as my shift was ending. My signature was already at the bottom, dated, witnessed, complete. But I hadn't written it. I hadn't admitted anyone by that name. The name was mine. I've worked intake at Millbrook Psychiatric Hospital for 4 years. The job is procedural, almost meditative in its repetition. Halloween night shifts are typically quiet. Most crisis interventions happen earlier in the evening, after parties turn volatile or when someone's medication schedule collapses under seasonal stress. By the time I clock in at 11 p.m., the chaos has usually settled into paperwork. This past Halloween started no differently. I arrived, signed in, reviewed the pending admissions queue. 3 transfers from county holding. 1 voluntary 72-hour observation. Standard. I prepared the intake packets. Form 5150 for involuntary holds. Consent documentation, medical history templates. Everything printed and stacked in the order I'd use them. At 11:34 p.m., I processed the first patient. His answers were sluggish but cooperative. I filled in the demographics section by hand, as hospital policy requires for initial entry. Name, date of birth, emergency contact. My handwriting is distinctive, small, angular, with the lowercase a always closed into a perfect circle. I've written thousands of these forms. By 12:50 a.m., all 4 admissions were complete. I filed the originals in the night drop and scanned copies into the system. Then I began preparing blank forms for potential walk-ins. We keep a stack of 20 at the ready. At 1:15 a.m., I returned from restocking the supply closet and noticed the top form was no longer blank. The patient name field read, Clara Voss. I stared at it. I knew I hadn't written anything. I'd literally just placed those forms down 5 minutes earlier. I picked it up, turning it over. The ink was fresh. I could smell it. The handwriting was mine, small, angular. The lowercase a perfect circle. I checked the security camera monitor at my desk. It showed only me leaving the room, then returning. No one else had entered. I told myself I'd filled it in reflexively, some muscle memory error, but I didn't recognize the name. I checked the system. No Clara Voss in our records. I set the form aside and placed a fresh blank sheet on top of the stack. At 2:03 a.m., I glanced down and saw 2 forms were filled out. The second name, Margaret Dorn, same handwriting. Same ink. I had not moved from my chair in 20 minutes. The camera confirmed it. I felt my throat tighten. I stood, walked to the stack, and examined both sheets. They were complete. Demographics, insurance information, admission reason. Under reason for admission, both read, dissociative fugue with identity disturbance. The dates of birth were identical. Both listed April 9th, 1989, my birthday. I pulled the forms off the stack and shoved them into my desk drawer. My hands were shaking. I stared at the blank forms, willing them to stay blank. For 30 minutes, I didn't look away. At 2:41 a.m., my phone chimed. A text from my supervisor. Everything okay? System shows multiple pending entries under your login. I checked the database. 4 new intake records had been logged in the past 90 minutes. All partial entries. All with my birthday. The names, Clara Voss, Margaret Dorn, Lillian Cross, Janet Emery. I hadn't entered any of them. I pulled the drawer open. 4 forms now, each completely filled in my handwriting. The stack on my desk had replenished itself. 20 blanks again, as if I'd never taken any. I tried logging out of the system. It wouldn't let me. The screen refreshed and a new patient record appeared. Ruth Collier. Dobbs, 0409-1989. I looked down. Another form completed. By 3:30 a.m., I'd stopped counting. Every few minutes, another form appeared, filled in my handwriting. Different names, but always the same birthday, always the same diagnosis. I called my supervisor. No answer. I called security. The line rang, then disconnected. I tried to leave. The intake office door was locked from the outside. My keycard didn't work. I pounded on the glass, but the hallway was empty. The camera monitor showed my own face staring back at the lens, but I wasn't looking at the camera. I was looking down at my desk. On the screen, I watched myself pick up a pen and begin writing. At my actual desk, I was not holding a pen. The forms kept coming. I stopped reading the names. They piled up in the drawer, on the desk, scattered across the floor. My handwriting, over and over, the same birth date, the same reason for admission. At 4:15 a.m., I noticed the stack was finally shrinking. 18 blanks, then 15, then 10. At 5:50 a.m., only one blank form remained. I stared at it, my chest tight, my pulse hammering in my ears. I knew what would happen. I knew I wouldn't be able to stop it. At 6:47 a.m., I looked down. The form was complete. Patient name, Eleanor Marsh. Date of birth, 04/09/1989. Reason for admission, dissociative fugue with identity disturbance. And at the bottom, in the admitted by field, my signature. Dated today, witnessed, complete, Eleanor Marsh. I stared at the name. I knew it distantly, like something I'd once been called in a dream. The door unlocked with a soft click. The hallway lights came on. The hospital woke around me and I heard voices approaching. Morning shift, shift change, routine. Someone knocked. Eleanor, you okay in there? You're running late. I looked at the form in my hands. My name was Eleanor Marsh. It had always been Eleanor Marsh, except I couldn't remember arriving here. I couldn't remember last week. Or last year. I opened the drawer. Inside were hundreds of forms, all names I'd once answered to, all birthdays I'd once claimed as mine. The system chimed. A new admission alert. The name on the screen was mine, but not the one I'd woken up with this morning. Some shifts, I think, never actually end. They just rename you and start again. And somewhere in the filing system, every version of you is still checking in, still filling out forms, still trying to remember which name you're supposed to answer to. I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened. Someone smiled at me holding a clipboard. Ready for morning rounds? She asked. I looked at her ID badge. The name wasn't familiar, but the birthday was April 9th, 1989. The light under Dr. Carver's office door was always on, every night, for a year after he died, and when I finally opened it, he was still sitting at his desk, writing notes for rounds that would never end. I was hired as the attending psychiatrist at Hargrove State Hospital in early October. The position had been vacant since the previous Halloween, when Dr. Raymond Carver collapsed during evening rounds. Myocardial infarction. He was declared dead in the ambulance. His memorial service was held in the hospital chapel. I saw the plaque on my first day, a small brass plate outside the office I'd inherited, in memory of Dr. Raymond Carver, 1961-2023. The administration was efficient. His personal effects had been cleared. The office was repainted. My name went on the door within a week. Everything felt appropriately transitioned, respectfully closed, except for the notes. I first noticed them during my second week. I was reviewing patient charts, cross-referencing medication orders, when I saw an entry dated 3 days prior. The prescribing physician, Dr. R. Carver. I assumed it was a clerical error, some outdated template auto-filling his name. I flagged it for the records department. They assured me it would be corrected. 2 days later, I found another. Then 3 more, all dated recently, all signed with his name. I raised the issue at the attending staff meeting. Dr. Oakes, the clinical director, frowned. That shouldn't be possible, she said. His credentials were deactivated the day he passed, but the entries kept appearing. Medication adjustments, therapy session notes, even a discharge summary for a patient I'd personally cleared. The handwriting in the scanned notes was unmistakably consistent. Tight, efficient, old-fashioned cursive. I began asking nurses if they'd noticed anything unusual. Most shook their heads, but one, a veteran named Lucille, paused. You mean the night logs? She asked. I didn't know what she meant. She pulled up the digital nursing station logs, time-stamped entries recording which doctors reviewed patients after hours. Dr. Carver's name appeared at least twice a week. Logged between 2 and 4 a.m. We thought it was a glitch, Lucille said quietly. But honestly, a couple of us have seen the light on in his old office. Your office. Late at night. I felt a chill but dismissed it. Computers malfunction. Lights get left on. That night, I stayed late to finish evaluations. The ward settled into its nocturnal rhythm, muted voices, the hum of the HVAC, the occasional distant alarm. Around 2:30 a.m., I walked to the break room for coffee. That's when I saw it, a thin bar of light glowing beneath the door of my office. I stopped. I'd turned off the lights when I left. I was certain. I approached slowly, my keycard ready. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. I swiped the card. The lock clicked. I opened the door. The light was on. The desk lamp specifically, the old brass one that had been there when I arrived, the one I'd assumed was hospital property. Papers were spread across the desk. A pen lay uncapped, but no one was there. I stepped inside, scanning the corners, the closet. Empty. I checked the papers. Patient notes. Handwritten, the same tight cursive. The top sheet was dated today. The patient's name, Angela Rourke. I knew her, she'd been admitted last week. The note detailed a session I hadn't conducted, but the observations were clinically sound. The recommendations appropriate. I sat down in my chair, unnerved. I checked the timestamp on my computer login. No one had accessed my account. I locked the office behind me and left. The next morning, I found Angela Rourke's chart updated. The session note from last night had been scanned and filed. The attending physician listed Dr. R. Carver. I went to Dr. Oakes immediately. She contacted IT. They ran diagnostics. No unauthorized access. No shared credentials. The system insisted Dr. Carver's login had been permanently disabled. Then who's writing these notes? I demanded. No one had an answer. I decided to stay overnight in my office. If someone was accessing it, I'd catch them. I arrived at 11 p.m. on Halloween night, exactly 1 year after Dr. Carver's death. The ward was quiet. I locked the door from the inside and settled in at the desk, pretending to work while watching the door. At 2:13 a.m., the lamp turned on by itself. I froze. I hadn't touched it. The switch clicked audibly, and the warm light pooled across the desk. Then I heard the sound of paper rustling. I looked down. The patient files I'd stacked were moving, pages turning as if fingers were leafing through them. But there were no hands. No visible presence. A pen rolled across the desk and stopped in front of me. Then it lifted, slowly, smoothly, and began to write on a blank progress note. I couldn't breathe. I watched the pen form letters in that familiar cursive. Patient exhibits increasing paranoia and dissociative symptoms. Recommend continued observation. The pen stopped. Then, beneath the clinical note, it wrote, Dr. Ainsley, please don't be afraid. I need your help. My hands were shaking. I grabbed the note. Dr. Carver? I whispered. The pen moved again. Yes, you're dead, I know. But I didn't finish rounds. I stared at the words. What do you mean? I was mid-evaluation when it happened. Patient in crisis. I never completed the assessment. I can't leave until it's done. Which patient? The pen hesitated, then wrote a name. Samuel Trent, bed 12. I knew Samuel. Severe schizoaffective disorder. He'd been on the ward for 6 months. No family. No discharge plan. I promised him I'd find a placement. I never did. He's still waiting. I felt a profound sadness wash over me. Dr. Carver, you died. You can't... I know, but I can't leave him. Please, finish it for me. The lamp flickered. The pen fell still. I sat there for a long time, staring at the note. Then, I pulled Samuel Trent's file and began reading. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked with social services, advocacy groups, and a transitional housing network. It took persistent calls and late-night paperwork, but I finally secured a placement for Samuel, a supervised group home with psychiatric support. On the day he was discharged, I walked him to the exit myself. He smiled, a rare expression for him, and thanked me. Dr. Carver would have been proud, I said gently. Samuel looked confused. Who? The doctor before me. He shook his head. There was no doctor before you. You've always been my doctor. I watched him leave, unsettled. That night, I returned to my office. The light was off. The desk was clear. I turned on the lamp and checked the patient logs. Dr. Carver's name no longer appeared. I sat down, relieved. But as I reached for my pen, I noticed something on the desk. A small handwritten note I hadn't seen before. Thank you. You gave him what I couldn't. Now I can rest. But be careful. The ward has a way of holding on to us. Promises made here don't always let go, even after we think we're finished. I folded the note and placed it in my drawer. That was 3 weeks ago. Last night I stayed late again to finish evaluations. Around 2 a.m. I passed by the office of Dr. Oakes, the clinical director. Her light was on. I paused. I'd seen her leave hours earlier. I knocked softly. No answer. I tried the handle. Locked. Through the frosted glass, I saw a silhouette at the desk, writing. I heard her voice, muffled, speaking to someone I couldn't see. I know. I'll finish it. I promise. I stepped back, my pulse racing. This morning, Dr. Oakes didn't come in. HR said she'd had a medical emergency overnight. Cardiac event. She's in intensive care. But when I checked the system, her login was still active. Notes filed under her name. Sessions documented. And late tonight, as I prepared to leave, I saw the light under her office door. Some promises, I'm learning, bind us tighter than we realize. And some shifts never end. They just wait for someone else to keep the rounds going. I've started keeping my office light off at night, just in case, because I'm beginning to understand. Once you make a promise to a patient here, the ward holds you to it, whether you're alive to keep it or not. The voice came through my headset at 3:42 a.m., clear as day. My name is Kelly. I've been here before. But the patient in the soundproof room was sedated, intubated, and completely silent. And I'd never told anyone in that room my name. The isolation wing at Fenwick Psychiatric Hospital is reserved for patients in acute crisis, those at risk of harming themselves or others, those whose episodes are so severe they require complete environmental control. Last summer, administration approved funding for a new soundproof observation chamber in the East Wing. The room was designed with the latest acoustic dampening technology, triple-paned glass, rubberized walls, a sealed ventilation system that filtered even whispers into silence. It was state-of-the-art. It was humane, and it was supposed to make our jobs easier. I'm a psychiatric nurse with 7 years on the ward. I've worked isolation before. Old-school padded cells, restraint protocols, the grim practicality of keeping people safe from themselves. The new soundproof room felt like progress. Clean, clinical, controlled. We christened it in late September. Patient 0 was a young man in a manic episode, non-responsive to verbal de-escalation. We moved him in, and the room performed flawlessly. We could observe him through the glass, monitor vitals remotely, communicate through the intercom system if needed. He calmed within hours. By October, the room was in regular rotation. We'd use it for overnight observation when patients were acutely agitated or sedated for their own safety. I drew the assignment several times. It was easy work. Check the monitors every 30 minutes, log vitals, ensure the IV lines stayed patent. The patients were usually asleep or too medicated to do much else. But Halloween night was different. I arrived for my shift at 11 p.m. The floor was fully staffed. But the soundproof room had a solo patient. A woman in her 40s admitted earlier that day after a psychotic break. Her name was unpronounceable to me, something Eastern European, so the chart listed her as Jane Doe 1031 until family could be contacted. She'd been sedated and intubated after becoming combative in the ER. Stable, but requiring close monitoring. I reviewed her chart. No significant history, no priors. Just a sudden, severe break with reality. The notes said she'd been found wandering a parking lot, screaming that they were calling her back. At 11:47 p.m., I did my first check. She was motionless on the bed, vitals steady, sedation holding. The room was silent. I could see her through the glass, but I heard nothing. No breath sounds, no rustling. Just the faint hum of my own equipment in the observation alcove. I marked the log and moved on. At 12:30 a.m., I returned. Same status. Silent. Still. At 1:15 a.m., I noticed the intercom light was on. That was odd. The intercom system was voice-activated from inside the room, but she was intubated. She couldn't speak. I checked the settings. Everything looked normal. I switched it off manually. At 2 a.m., the light was on again. I frowned and leaned closer to the monitor. The patient hadn't moved. I toggled the intercom to listen. Silence. I turned it off again and made a note to report the malfunction in the morning. At 2:47 a.m., I heard a voice. It came through my headset, the wireless set we wear to monitor the intercom remotely while making rounds. A woman's voice, low and raspy, speaking in careful, deliberate English. "Can you hear me?" I stopped mid-step in the hallway. I turned back toward the observation alcove and checked the monitor. The patient was still unconscious. Hadn't moved, I activated my microphone. "This is Nurse Bowen. Who is this?" No response. Just static. I walked back to the alcove and looked through the glass. The patient lay exactly as I'd left her. I checked the intercom system again. The voice activation light was off. I must have imagined it. At 3:42 a.m., the voice came back. "My name is Kelly." I froze. The voice was clearer now, almost intimate, as if someone were speaking directly into my ear. "I've been here before. My name is Kelly. I've worked this ward for years, but I've never introduced myself to an unconscious patient. I don't announce my name over intercoms." I checked the patient. Still sedated, still silent. I pulled off my headset and examined it. No damage, no interference. I put it back on. "This is Nurse Bowen. Identify yourself." The voice responded immediately, but not to me. "Kelly. Kelly Bowen. I need you to remember." My chest tightened. I switched off the intercom manually at the wall panel. I pulled the plug. The system went dead, but the voice continued in my headset. "You've been here before. You don't remember, but I do." I ripped the headset off and threw it onto the desk. My hands were trembling. I stared at the patient through the glass. She hadn't moved. Her monitors showed stable sedation. She couldn't be speaking. I grabbed the landline and called security. "I need someone in the East Wing isolation alcove. Now. What's the issue?" I'm hearing something." "Through the intercom." "But the patient is sedated. Could be feedback." "We'll send someone." I waited, watching the glass. The patient's chest rose and fell with the ventilator. Nothing else moved. The security officer arrived 10 minutes later. He checked the room, the intercom, the monitors. "Everything looks fine to me," he said. "You sure you heard something?" I nodded, but I wasn't sure anymore. He left. I sat down at the desk, staring at the headset I'd thrown aside. At 4:30 a.m., I heard scratching, not through the headset. Through the glass, I looked up. The patient's hand was moving, just her fingers, twitching against the mattress, scratching. I stood and moved closer. Her eyes were still closed, still sedated, but her fingers kept moving, tracing something on the sheet. I activated the in-room camera and zoomed in. She was writing, letter by letter. Her finger traced words onto the fabric. "Kelly Bowen." I backed away from the glass. The monitors still showed stable sedation. She wasn't conscious. She couldn't be, but her hand kept moving. "You were patient 1019. I felt dizzy. I checked the logbook. Patient 1019 had been in this room 2 weeks ago. I remembered the case. A woman in her 30s admitted after a suicide attempt. She'd been discharged after 72 hours. I'd been her nurse, but that wasn't me. That was my patient. The scratching continued. "You don't remember. They made you forget." I grabbed the logbook and flipped back through the entries. Patient 1019, admitted October 15th, discharged October 18th. Name, Kelly Bowen. I stared at the page. That wasn't possible. I was the nurse. I'd logged those entries myself, but the handwriting was mine. I pulled up the digital records. Patient 1019, admission notes. Presenting complaint, acute dissociative episode. Patient claims to be a staff nurse. No memory of admission. My breath caught. I scrolled further. Discharge summary. Patient responded to treatment. Reoriented to baseline. Returned to work under observation. Returned to work. I looked at my badge. My photo, my name. Kelly Bowen, RN. I'd been wearing this badge for 7 years, or had I? I checked the staff directory. My hire date, October 19th. 3 days after patient 1019 was discharged, the scratching stopped. I looked up at the glass. The patient's eyes were open. She was staring directly at me. Her mouth moved behind the intubation tube, forming words I couldn't hear. But I understood. "You're still here." I stumbled backward. The monitors began alarming, her heart rate spiking. I hit the call button. Staff flooded in. They sedated her further, adjusted the ventilator. Within minutes, she was stable again, but her eyes stayed open, and they stayed on me. I filed my report and left at the end of my shift. I drove home, showered, ate breakfast. Everything felt normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about the logbook. That night, I returned to the ward early. I pulled the archived records from 2 years ago, then 3, then 5. Every 6 months, like clockwork, a patient was admitted to isolation. Same presenting complaint, same treatment, same discharge, and every time the patient's name was the name of a staff member who'd started working here days later. I found my own admission file buried in the archives. Patient 1019, photo ID attached. It was me. Younger, confused. The intake note said I'd been found wandering outside the hospital, insisting I worked there, but I had no memory of it. I checked the current staff roster. 43 names. I cross-referenced them against patient admissions over the past decade. 31 matches. We'd all been patients first. I don't know what happens in that soundproof room. I don't know what they do to make us forget, or why they let us keep working here afterward. But I know the voice I heard wasn't trying to scare me. It was trying to remind me. And now, every time I pass that glass, I see my own reflection staring back, and I can't tell anymore if I'm the nurse or the patient. Some rooms don't just isolate sound. They isolate memory, and once you've been inside, you never really leave. You just forget you're still there. Last night I trained a new hire. Her name was on the admission log 2 weeks ago. She doesn't remember, but she will. We all do eventually. The room makes sure of it. The discharge paperwork looped every October 29th at 11:52 p.m. Same patient, same error. Except this year, when I traced the admission signature, I found my name. And the timestamp said, pending current session. I've worked medical billing at Riverside Psychiatric Hospital for 6 years. My job is to process discharge paperwork, verify insurance claims, and reconcile patient accounts before final release. It's meticulous work, endless forms, codes, and approvals. Most discharges clear within hours. Some take days if insurance disputes the claim. But there's one file that never clears. Patient 84J. Every year on October 29th at exactly 11:52 p.m., the file reappears in the discharge queue. Same name, same admission date, October 29th, 1984. Same error message, unable to process, missing discharge authorization. The first time I saw it, I assumed it was a legacy system glitch, some old record corrupted during a database migration. I flagged it for IT. They said they'd look into it. It came back the next year. Same time. Same error. I asked my supervisor, Linda, about it. She frowned. Oh, that. Yeah, it's been doing that since before I started. We just ignore it. But who's patient 84J? She shrugged. No idea. Probably someone who was discharged before digital records. The system just hiccups every year. Don't waste time on it. But I couldn't let it go. I pulled the file and examined every field. Patient name, redacted admission date, 10/29/1984. Attending physician, Dr. Harold Finch, deceased 1991. Reason for admission, acute dissociative disorder with catatonic features. Discharge status, pending authorization. Everything else was blank. No billing codes, no insurance information, no next of kin. Just that endlessly looping error. I searched the archives for paper records from 1984. Nothing. I contacted HR for staff records from that era. Dr. Finch had indeed worked here, but his files had been destroyed after his death. Dead end. The next October, I was ready. When the file appeared, I tried to manually authorize the discharge. The system refused. Insufficient credentials. I tried escalating to administration. Same error. I asked Linda to try. She sighed, humoring me, and logged in. She clicked, Authorize discharge. The screen went black for 3 seconds. Then the error returned, unable to process, missing discharge authorization. See, she said, it's a ghost file. Just let it loop. But this year, this Halloween season, I decided to dig deeper. I contacted a retired billing clerk named Margaret who'd worked here in the 80s. She was in her 70s now, living in a nursing home an hour away. I visited her on a Saturday. Patient 84J, she said slowly. God, I haven't thought about that in decades. You remember it? She nodded. It was my first year here, October '84. A patient came in, young guy, maybe mid-20s. He'd been found, unresponsive in his apartment, nonverbal, completely catatonic. They admitted him under a Jane Doe number until they could identify him. And they never did. No ID, no missing persons report. He just existed here, Dr. Finch treated him for weeks. Then one night the patient walked out, just stood up and left. Security footage showed him walking straight out the front door. No one stopped him. No one even saw him. So he was never discharged? She shook her head. Technically, no. Dr. Finch filed the paperwork, but admin said they couldn't process a discharge without a confirmed identity. The file stayed open. And then... She paused. Then what? Dr. Finch died a few years later. Heart attack. After that, no one wanted to touch the file. It just sat there, unresolved. Eventually, it got digitized and started looping. But why every October 29th? Margaret's face darkened. That was the night the patient walked out. October 29th, 1984, 11:52 p.m. I felt a chill. That evening, I stayed late at the office. I wanted to be logged in when the file appeared. At 11:50 p.m., I sat at my desk, watching the queue. At 11:52 p.m., the file materialized. I opened it immediately and started digging into the metadata. File creation logs, edit history, authorization trail. And that's when I saw it. The original admission signature. M. Brennan, billing clerk. M. Brennan. My name is Mallory Brennan, but I wasn't born until 1991. I couldn't have processed a file in 1984. I checked the employee ID attached to the signature. It was mine. Current. Active. I scrolled through the edit history. The file had been accessed every year on October 29th at 11:52 p.m. by the same user, M. Brennan. I'd never accessed this file before tonight, but the log said otherwise. It showed entries going back 15 years, every year, always at 11:52 p.m. My hands were shaking. I clicked on the most recent entry, last year's. The note field read, "Attempted discharge authorization, unable to process. Will retry next cycle." I hadn't written that. I didn't even remember being here last October 29th at midnight. I checked my email archives. Nothing. I checked my personal calendar. Blank. But the log insisted I'd been here, trying to discharge patient 84J every year, for 15 years. I looked at the current file. At the bottom, a new field had appeared. Current session. In progress. I clicked it. A form opened. A discharge authorization form. Partially filled. Patient name, Mallory Brennan. Admission date, 10/29/2009. Attending. Physician, Dr. Harold Finch, deceased 1991. I stared at the screen. That wasn't possible. I checked the hospital admission records. Patient 84J had been redesignated in 2009. New file number, MBR 1029 Mallory Brennan. Admitted October 29th, 2009. Reason for admission, acute dissociative disorder with catatonic features. Discharge. Status, pending authorization. I didn't remember 2009. I remembered starting work here in 2018. I remembered my training, my first day, my supervisor introducing me to the billing software. But the file said I'd been admitted 15 years ago. I scrolled through the treatment notes. They detailed sessions with a Dr. Voss, cognitive behavioral, therapy, memory reconstruction, gradual reintegration. Final note, dated 2018. Patient demonstrates full functional reintegration. Recommends outpatient work therapy. Approved for supervised billing position at hospital. Supervised billing position. I looked around my office. I'd always worked alone. Or had I? I pulled up the staff directory. My name, Mallory Brennan, billing clerk, reintegration program. The screen flickered. The discharge form refreshed. At the bottom, a new message appeared. Authorization pending. Patient must complete discharge cycle before file closure. I clicked authorize. The system asked, "Are you certain you wish to discharge patient MBR 1029? I hesitated. If I authorized it, would I stop coming here? Would I stop being Mallory Brennan? I looked at the error message. Unable to process, missing discharge authorization. I was the only one who could authorize my own discharge. But if I did, where would I go? I didn't remember life before this hospital. The clock ticked past midnight, October 30th. The file disappeared from the queue, and I was still here. Some discharges, I'm learning, aren't about leaving. They're about realizing you never arrived in the first place. You've just been cycling through the same paperwork, the same authorization loop, trying to remember who you were before you became a patient number in your own system. Next October, the file will reappear. And I'll be here trying again, because some of us aren't staff. We're just patients who forgot we never left. I found the rusted key on a Tuesday, lying in the center of the hallway where no one could have dropped it. It didn't match any lock in the building, but every door I tried it on opened. And what was behind them shouldn't have existed. I've been an orderly at Blackthorn Psychiatric Hospital for 9 years. The work is physical, moving patients, restocking supplies, cleaning rooms, transporting equipment between floors. I know this building intimately. Every locked door, every janitor's closet, every utility stairwell. I carry a ring of 15 keys, each one labeled and logged. I know what they open. On October 24th, I found a 16th. It was lying in the middle of C-Wing's main corridor, right outside the med storage room. Old iron, heavy, oxidized to a mottled brown-green. The teeth were irregular, hand-filed. It didn't match any key I'd ever seen in the hospital. I picked it up and checked the nearby offices. No one had reported losing anything. I asked the nursing staff. No one recognized it. I should have turned it in to Lost and Found. Instead, I pocketed it. That night, out of curiosity, I tried it on the med storage door. It fit. The lock turned smoothly, and the door opened. Inside was the med storage room I'd been in 100 times before. Nothing unusual. I locked it again and moved on. But the next night, I tried it on a different door, the old linens closet. On B-Wing, which had been locked for years after water damage made it unusable, the key fit. I opened it. Inside wasn't a linen closet. It was a staircase, narrow, concrete, leading down. I stood there, staring. I knew the hospital's layout. There was no staircase here. This was an exterior wall. Below this floor was the parking garage. But the stairs were real. I could see them descending into shadow. I closed the door quickly, my heart pounding. I tried the hospital's master key on the same lock. It didn't fit. Only the rusted key worked. I told myself I'd imagined it. Exhaustion. Stress. But the next night, I came back. I opened the door again. The staircase was still there. I descended 3 steps. The air was colder. The walls were damp. At the bottom, maybe 20 steps down, I saw another door. Wooden. Arched. I didn't go further. I climbed back up and locked the door behind me. Over the next week, I tried the key on different doors throughout the hospital. It fit every single one. But what was behind them changed. The supply room on the 3rd floor opened onto a hallway I didn't recognize. Long, institutional, lined with doors that had small windows like cells. I walked halfway down before I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. No one was there. I ran back and slammed the door shut. The maintenance access on the ground floor led to a boiler room 3 times the size it should have been. The machinery was ancient, cast iron, riveted, hissing with steam. I saw a logbook on a rusted table. The last entry was dated 1947. A door in the administration wing opened onto a small chapel. Wooden pews, stained glass, an altar draped in dust. On the wall was a bronze plaque, in memory of the lost. Blackthorn Asylum, 1863-1962. Blackthorn Psychiatric Hospital was built in 1975. There was no asylum. There was no chapel. But I was standing in it. I started documenting everything. I made a list of doors and what they revealed. I took photos, but they came out blurred or blank, as if something resisted being recorded. I became obsessed. Every night I'd try a new door. Each one showed me something impossible. Hallways that looped back on themselves, rooms filled with old patient records that didn't match our system, a cafeteria where trays of food sat untouched, still warm. And then I found the door in the basement. It was unmarked, set into a corner near the electrical room. I'd passed it 1,000 times and never thought twice about it. But on Halloween night, I tried the key. The door opened onto a narrow corridor. No lights, just dim phosphorescence from somewhere deeper in. I used my flashlight. The walls were tiled, white ceramic, cracked and stained. The floor sloped downward. I should have stopped, but I kept walking. The corridor ended at a large metal door. Circular, like a vault. In the center was a keyhole. I tried the rusted key. It fit. The door opened with a deep grinding sound. Inside was a round room, empty. The walls were covered in names, thousands of them scratched into the plaster. Dates beside each one. I scanned them with my light. Michael Frost, 1889 Clara Hewitt, 1902 Samuel Wren, 1931 I kept reading. The dates climbed through the decades, 1940s, 1960s, 1980s. Then I saw Daniel Cass, 2015, Daniel Cass. I knew that name. He'd been an orderly here. He disappeared 9 years ago. Just didn't show up for his shift. No one ever found him. I kept scanning. Marcus Boyd, 2019. Another orderly. Quit suddenly, they said. Moved out of state. My light landed on the newest entry, carved deep and fresh. Elliot Lang, 2023. My name. I stepped back. The door behind me slammed shut. I spun around. No handle on the inside. I pushed. Nothing. I pounded on the metal. It didn't budge. My flashlight flickered. I turned back to the wall. Beneath my name, new words were appearing, carved by invisible hands, letter by letter. You open the door. Now the door keeps you, I screamed. I threw myself at the door. My shoulder hit metal and pain shot through my arm. The carving continued. Every key opens a place, but some places don't let you leave. You were warned. You kept one key too many. I pulled the rusted key from my pocket and hurled it at the wall. It clattered to the floor. The door behind me unlocked. I grabbed the handle and pulled. It opened onto the hospital basement. Familiar. Safe. I stumbled out, gasping. I slammed the door and ran. When I reached the main floor, I looked at my watch. 6:47 a.m. My shift was ending. But I'd gone into that room at 2 a.m., 4 hours. I'd been down there 4 hours. It had felt like minutes. I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls from the hospital. Messages asking where I was. Security had been looking for me. I tried to explain. I told them about the key, the doors, the room with the names. They checked the basement. No vault door, no round room. Just the electrical room and storage. They thought I'd had a breakdown. They put me on leave. Mandatory psych evaluation. I went home. But that night, I noticed something. My keyring had 16 keys again. I counted them. 15 labeled hospital keys, and 1 rusted iron key. I'd thrown it away. I'd left it in that room. But it was back. I tried to throw it out again. I buried it in the trash, drove it to a dumpster across town, dropped it into a river. Every morning, it was back on my keyring. And every night, I hear doors unlocking, in my apartment, in my car. In places I've never been. I don't open them anymore, but I can feel them waiting. Because some keys don't just open doors. They mark you. They claim you. And once you've used them, you're part of what they unlock. Last night I woke to the sound of scratching. I turned on the light. On my bedroom wall, carved into the paint, Elliot Lang, 2023. Pending collection. The key was sitting on my nightstand, gleaming like new. And somewhere in the hospital, I know there's a door with my name on it. A door I opened once, and now it's waiting for me to come back. Because the thing about keys is this. They open doors. But some doors are designed to close behind you, and once you're inside, you're just another name on the wall. Another entry in a place that doesn't exist, until you're the one trapped there, waiting for the next person to find your key. I hit play on the session recording and heard my patient's voice say, "Welcome back, Dr. Leon. I've been waiting for you." But the session had started with me greeting him. And when I checked the file length, it was 2 hours long. We'd only spoken for 60 minutes. I am a clinical psychologist specializing in forensic psychiatry. For the past 11 years, I've worked at Covenant Psychiatric Institute, conducting court-ordered evaluations and long-term therapy for patients involved in the criminal justice system. My work requires meticulous documentation. Every session is recorded, transcribed, and archived. It's not optional, it's legally mandated. I've always been precise about this. I use a digital recorder with timestamp functionality. I label every file with the patient's initials, date, and session number. I back them up to a secure server and keep local copies on an encrypted drive. I've never lost a recording. I've never had a technical failure until Halloween night. The patient in question was a man I'll refer to as DL, a 34-year-old male with a diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder and a history of violent ideation. He'd been remanded to our care after an incident involving a perceived threat to public safety. My role was to assess his competency for trial and provide ongoing therapeutic intervention. DL was compliant but unsettling. He spoke slowly, deliberately, and often referenced knowing things he shouldn't know. He claimed to have memories of conversations that hadn't happened yet. He described future sessions with me in detail, what I would wear, what I would say, even the questions I hadn't yet formulated. I noted this as part of his delusional system. Precognitive ideation is not uncommon in patients with his diagnosis. Our sessions followed a strict routine. I'd begin with a standard greeting, review the session's objectives, and proceed with semi-structured interviews. Each session lasted exactly 60 minutes. I recorded everything. On October 31st, we had our 12th session. It was early evening, around 6 p.m. The ward was quiet. I met him in the secure interview room, windowless, soundproofed, monitored by camera. I set up my recorder, pressed record, and began. Good evening. DL, today is October 31st, 2023. This is session 12. How are you feeling today? He smiled. I'm well, Dr. Leon, but you already know that. What do you mean? You've heard this before. You'll hear it again. I noted his comment and continued. We discussed his mood, his medication compliance, his sleep patterns. He answered each question calmly, but with a strange anticipatory quality, as if he were reciting lines he'd memorized. At one point, he said, "You're going to ask me about the dreams next." I hadn't planned to, but I did. Have you been experiencing any unusual dreams? He nodded. Yes, the same one. I'm in this room. You're asking me questions, but then the session reverses. You start answering my questions, and you don't remember doing it. What do you mean, reverses? You'll see. I ended the session at 7 p.m., exactly 60 minutes after we started. I pressed stop on the recorder. DL was escorted back to his unit. I labeled the file, DL 2023-1031 session 12 MP3I, packed up and went home. The next morning, I began transcribing the session. I do this manually for forensic cases. It ensures accuracy. I plugged in my headphones, opened the audio file, and pressed play. The first thing I heard was not my voice. It was his. Welcome back, Dr. Leon. I've been waiting for you. I frowned. That wasn't how the session started. I'd greeted him. I rewound the file to the beginning. Timestamp, his voice again. Welcome back, Dr. Leon. I've been waiting for you. I checked the file properties. Length 2 hours, 3 minutes. That wasn't possible. We'd spoken for 60 minutes. I'd stopped the recording. I fast-forwarded to the 1-hour mark where the session should have ended, but it didn't end. It continued, and the voice I heard was mine. DL, I don't understand what's happening. Please, I need you to explain this to me. You asked me the same thing last time, Doctor. Last time? What do you mean? This is the 4th session. You keep coming back. You keep forgetting. I don't remember this conversation. I know. That's the point. I stopped the playback, my hands shaking. I didn't remember saying any of that. I didn't remember a conversation continuing beyond 60 minutes. I checked my notes from yesterday. Session ended at 7 p.m. Patient escorted out. Recorder stopped, but the file insisted otherwise. I kept listening. For the next 30 minutes of the recording, I heard myself asking increasingly confused and frightened questions. DL responded patiently, as if guiding me through something I should already know. You have to stop recording these sessions, Dr. Leon. Why? Because every time you play them back, the session continues. It doesn't end when you think it ends. It loops, and you're still in it. That doesn't make sense. Check your watch. What time is it? There was a pause. Then my voice uncertain. 7:43. You stopped recording at 7. But the session didn't stop. You're still here with me, and you will be until you stop listening. I checked my own watch now. 17 a.m. I was in my office. Safe. The session had been yesterday. But on the recording, my voice began to break. I want to leave. Why can't I leave? Because you keep coming back. Every time you play the recording, you re-enter the session. And every time I have to explain this to you again. Please. I don't understand. You will, eventually. But it takes time. This is only your fourth loop. You'll need a few more before you stop fighting it. I heard myself crying. Then DL's voice, soft and almost kind. Dr. Leon, I need you to do something for me. What? At the end of this recording, you're going to leave a message for yourself. A warning. You need to tell yourself not to listen again. Can you do that? A long silence. Then, yes. Good. Go ahead. I heard my own voice, strained and exhausted, speaking directly into the recorder. Dr. Leon, if you're hearing this, stop the playback now. Do not listen further. Do not reopen this file. Delete it. Destroy the recorder. I don't know what's happening, but this session doesn't end. It keeps going. And I'm still in it. Please, don't listen again. The recording stopped. Timestamp 2347. I sat in my office, staring at the screen. I checked the session archive. The previous 11 recordings were normal, 60 minutes each, properly formatted, no anomalies. Only session 12 was corrupted. I should have deleted it. I should have reported it as a technical glitch, but I needed to understand. I listened again. This time, the file was longer. Hours, 41 minutes. It began the same way. Welcome back. Dr. Leon, I've been waiting for you, but the middle section was different. The conversation had shifted. I heard myself asking new questions, and DL providing new answers. How many times have I listened to this? This is your 5th time. Why can't I remember? Because the session resets your memory. Every time you play it, you re-enter the moment, and everything after that becomes part of the recording. You're not listening to a memory. You're experiencing it again. How do I stop? You don't. Not until you understand. Understand what? That you were never the therapist. You were always the patient. I stopped the recording. I checked my employment file. Hired 2012, licensed clinical psychologist. Specialization in forensic psychiatry. 11 years of service. But when I looked at my patient files, I found something I hadn't noticed before. Every patient I'd treated, 37 cases over 11 years, had been discharged within 6 months. Except one. Patient LD admitted October 31st, 2012. Diagnosis: dissociative identity disorder with delusional role reversal. Attending therapist. Dr. David Lorne. I searched the staff directory for Dr. Lorne. No results. Checked archived personnel files. Dr. David Lorne. Deceased. Died during a session with patient LD in 2012. Heart attack. Patient became unresponsive and was placed in long-term care. I pulled up a photo from the file. It was DL, my patient, except the photo showed him wearing a white coat. Sitting in my chair, I checked my own ID badge. Dr. Leon Marsh, licensed psychologist, but the name on patient LD's file was Leon Marsh. I opened the session recording again. This time, I fast-forwarded to the final message. My voice, broken and terrified. Dr. Leon, if you're hearing this, you need to know the truth. You're not the therapist. You're the patient. DL isn't his real name. It's your initials backward. You've been in this session for 11 years. Every time you listen, you forget. And every time he explains it again, please stop. Don't let him explain it anymore. Just stop listening. The recording ended. I looked at the date on my calendar. October 31st, 2023, the same date I was admitted. I checked the clock. 7 p.m. session time. There was a knock on my door. An orderly stepped in. Dr. Leon, your 6 o'clock is here. I turned. DL was standing in the doorway, smiling. Hello, doctor, he said. Ready to begin? I looked at my recorder. It was already running. Timestamp 000. I heard my own voice on the playback. Good evening, DL. Today is October 31st, 2023. This is session 12. How are you feeling today? I hadn't pressed record, but it was recording because the session had already started and I was already inside it. DL sat down. You'll understand eventually, he said gently. But for now, let's begin. I tried to stand. I couldn't. My hands reached for my notepad as if guided by routine I didn't control, and I heard myself ask, Have you been experiencing any unusual dreams? The session continued, and somewhere, on a recorder I couldn't see, it was being saved. Time-stamped, archived, waiting for the next time I'd listen. Because some sessions don't end when you stop recording. They end when you stop listening. But if you're the one in the recording, you never stop. You just forget you're still inside, and every playback is another session, another loop, another chance to remember what you've become. At 2:18 a.m., the medication cart's drawer opened by itself and dispensed a pill cup with my name on it. The dosage sheet listed medications I'd never prescribed, and under patient name, it read, Patel, Sonia, non-unit resident. I've been a psychiatric nurse at Halcyon Hills for 14 years. The overnight shift is my specialty. I prefer the quiet, the reduced stimulation, the chance to focus on individual patient needs without the chaos of daytime operations. My responsibilities include medication administration, hourly wellness checks, and documentation. I know my routine. I know my patients. I know every medication on my cart, or I thought I did. Halloween night, I began my shift at 11 p.m. The ward was calm. 23 patients, all stable. I reviewed the medication administration records and prepared my cart. We use a locked, multi-drawer system. Each drawer corresponds to a specific patient. Inside are pre-filled pill cups, labeled with name, time, and dosage. It's efficient and minimizes errors. At midnight, I started my first round. I rolled the cart down the west corridor, stopping at each room. Patients were compliant, no issues. By 1:30 a.m., I'd completed the circuit and returned the cart to the medication room. At 2 a.m., I began the second round, PRN medications for patients who needed sleep aids or anxiety management. I unlocked the cart and began rolling it down the hallway. That's when I heard it, a clicking sound, rhythmic, metallic. I stopped. The cart was clicking. The drawers, each one opening slightly, then closing, in sequence. Click, click, click. I crouched down and examined the locks. They were engaged. I jiggled the handles, secure. But the clicking continued, moving from drawer to drawer like a mechanical heartbeat. I told myself it was a loose mechanism. I made a note to report it in the morning. At 2:18 a.m., one drawer opened fully. I stared. The lock was still engaged. The drawer had simply slid open on its own. Inside was a pill cup I didn't recognize. I picked it up. It was labeled Patel, Sonia, 2:30 a.m., my name. I checked the dosage sheet attached to the cup. 3 medications. I recognized the names. Antipsychotic, mood stabilizer, sedative. Standard psychiatric regimen, but I wasn't a patient. I was the nurse. I looked at the cart's master list, a printout taped inside the top drawer that lists all patients and their scheduled medications. My name wasn't on it, but when I pulled the list out and turned it over, there was a second page. Non-unit residents, scheduled administration. My name was at the top. Beneath it, Patel, Sonia, Diob, 06/14/1982. Admission date, 10/31/2009. Medications, list of 3 drugs. Administered by night nurse on duty. I felt my chest tighten. I checked the date, October 31st, 2023. 14 years since the supposed admission date. I'd started working here in 2009, October 31st, 2009. I set the pill cup down and checked the other drawers. Each one now had a second pill cup behind the patient's labeled dose. Each labeled with a staff name: Dr. Warren, Rodriguez, intake clerk, Malloy, security. All hospital staff, all with dosages, all listed as non-unit residents. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. The hallway was empty, but the cart's drawers began clicking again, faster now, like a shuffling deck of cards. I backed away. The pill cup with my name fell off the cart and rolled across the floor, stopping at my feet. I picked it up. The pills inside rattled softly. I walked to the nurse's station and checked the digital medication administration record. I searched for my name. It was there. Patient ID P1031. Status active. Daily medications listed. Last administered 10/30/2023, 2:30 a.m. Yesterday I checked my badge. Nurse Sonia Patel, RN. 14 years of service. but the system said I was a patient. I pulled up my employee file. Hired October 31st, 2009, psychiatric nurse. Night shift. Excellent performance record. But beneath the employment data, there was a second tab I'd never noticed. Patient file, cross-reference. I clicked it. Patient name, Patel. Sonia, admission date, 10/31/2009. Diagnosis, delusional disorder with occupational fixation. Patient believes herself to be a staff nurse. Treatment includes role-play therapy and medication to manage episodic breaks. Current status, stable. Participating in supervised work therapy. Patient performs nursing duties under observation. Medication compliance monitored nightly. I read it 3 times. I checked the treatment notes. Entries dated every week for the past 14 years. Progress reports. Therapy sessions. Medication adjustments, all documenting my delusion that I was a nurse. I stood up. I looked around the nurses' station. Everything was familiar. The desk, the monitors, the schedule board with my name on it. But now I saw the small details I'd overlooked. The security camera pointed directly at me. Always. The locked door to the staff break room I'd never been able to open without someone else's key card. The way other nurses always checked my work, always reviewed my documentation, always double-checked my medication cart before I left the station. I thought they were being thorough, but they were supervising me. I looked at the pill cup in my hand. I'd been taking these pills every night for 14 years. I didn't remember taking them, but the records said I had. I walked back to the medication cart. The drawer with my name was still open. Inside, behind the pill cup, was a folder. I opened it. Work therapy progress report, Patel. Sonia. Patient continues to demonstrate full engagement with role-play scenario. Believes herself to be night shift nurse. Administers medications to other patients. Under covert staff supervision. Task performance is accurate and therapeutic for patient's sense of purpose. Recommend continued participation. Medication compliance remains excellent. Patient has not questioned her role in 6 months. I dropped the folder. The clicking started again. Every drawer on the cart opened simultaneously. Inside each one, behind the patient's labeled cup, was a second cup. All with staff names, all of us. Every night shift worker, we were all patients. The cart wasn't malfunctioning. It was dispensing our doses, and we'd been taking them, night after night, believing we were the ones administering care. I heard a door open behind me. I turned. Dr. Warren stepped into the hallway, smiling. Sonia, everything okay? You're running behind schedule. I stared at him. Are we patients? He frowned. The kind of expression you give someone who's confused. Sonia, you know the answer to that. You've been doing so well. Don't start questioning things now. I found the files. I found the medication records, he sighed. It's the stress. Halloween shifts are always hard. Come on, take your meds. You'll feel better. He held out the pill cup. I looked at it, then at him. Are you a patient too? He didn't answer. He just kept holding the cup, waiting. I took it. My hands moved automatically. I swallowed the pills dry. He nodded. Good, now finish your rounds. The patients need you. I watched him walk away. The hallway seemed longer now. The lights dimmer. I returned to the cart. The drawers had closed. Everything looked normal. I rolled it down the corridor, stopping at each room, dispensing medications. At 6:45 a.m., my shift ended. I clocked out. I went home, but tonight I'll come back. I'll prepare the cart. I'll administer medications, because that's what I do. That's who I am. And somewhere in the medication room, a drawer with my name will open, and I'll take my dose. Because the best patients are the ones who don't know they're patients. They just keep working. Keep following routines. Keep taking their pills, and the ward runs smoothly, forever. I watched my reflection stay in the glass after I walked away. It smiled at me, waved slowly, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. Then it turned around and started talking to someone on the other side. St. Jude's Psychiatric Hospital underwent renovations last summer. The most significant change was the installation of new observation glass throughout the inpatient units. The glass was described as reflective safety glass, a dual-function material that allowed staff to observe patients from the corridor while also providing patients with a mirror for self-care activities. It was marketed as therapeutic, meant to reduce the institutional feel of the ward. I'm a charge nurse on the acute care unit. I've worked at St. Jude's for 8 years. I supported the renovations. The old glass was scratched, fogged, often difficult to see through. The new panels were pristine, flawless, and the reflections were astonishingly clear, too clear. We started noticing discrepancies during the first week after installation. It was small things at first. A patient would be sitting on their bed, arms folded, staring at the wall. But in the reflection, they'd be standing, or their arms would be raised. We attributed it to angles, distortion, parallax. Reflections are tricky. The mind fills in gaps, but the discrepancies became harder to dismiss. One evening, I was conducting hourly checks. I stopped outside room 7, where a patient named Mr. Calloway was lying on his bed, eyes closed, apparently asleep. I glanced at the glass to confirm. In the reflection, he was sitting up, smiling. I looked directly at him through the glass. Still lying down, eyes closed, I looked at the reflection again. Sitting up, smiling, facing me, I opened the door. He was asleep. I checked his vitals. Normal. I closed the door and looked at the glass once more. Now the reflection showed him lying down, eyes closed. Matching reality. I reported it to maintenance. They inspected the glass, no issues. Perfect installation. But the discrepancies continued, and they weren't limited to one patient. In room 3, a young woman named Alice stood by the window, brushing her hair. In the reflection, she was sitting on the floor, head in her hands, weeping. In room 9, Mr. Tan paced the room. In the reflection, he stood motionless in the corner. I started taking notes. I documented every mismatch. I showed the list to my supervisor. She accompanied me on rounds one night. We stood outside room 11. The patient, Ms. Gray, was lying on her side, facing the wall. In the reflection, she was standing at the door, palms pressed against the glass, staring out at us. My supervisor stared. That's not possible. We entered the room. Ms. Gray was asleep, facing the wall. When we exited and checked the glass again, the reflection matched. Ms. Gray lying on her side. My supervisor filed a formal complaint with the glass manufacturer. They sent a technician. He examined the panels, ran diagnostics, tested the coatings. No defects, no optical distortions. Maybe it's the lighting, he suggested. Reflections can be influenced by ambient light sources, but the discrepancies grew worse. By the 3rd week, we noticed reflections moving independently. A patient would stand still, and their reflection would walk across the room. A patient would sleep, and their reflection would sit up, turn toward the glass, and watch us. Staff began avoiding the glass. We'd conduct checks by opening the doors directly, rather than observing through the panels. But hospital policy required visual checks first. Entering every room every hour was inefficient and disruptive, so we kept using the glass, and the reflections kept watching us. One night I was finishing my rounds. It was late, nearly 3 a.m. I stopped outside room 4. The patient, a middle-aged man named Mr. DeWitt, was asleep in bed. In the reflection, he was awake, standing at the glass. Staring at me, I looked directly at him through the glass. Asleep in bed, I looked at the reflection. He was inches from the glass now. His mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. I stepped closer. He mouthed slowly, "Help me." I opened the door. He was asleep. I returned to the glass. The reflection was gone. Just an empty room. I walked away, unnerved. That's when I saw my own reflection. I was halfway down the corridor when I glanced at the glass panel outside room 6. My reflection was there. But I wasn't standing in front of that panel. I was 10 feet away. I stopped. My reflection stayed in the glass. I took a step forward. My reflection didn't move. I waved. It didn't wave back. It smiled. Then it waved at me, slowly, deliberately. And it mouthed something. "You're on the wrong side." I felt ice flood my chest. I turned and walked quickly toward the nurse's station. Behind me, I heard tapping. I looked back. My reflection was in every glass panel I passed, following me, tapping on the glass from the inside. I reached the nurse's station and locked myself in the office. I didn't look at the windows. I didn't look at any reflective surface, but I could hear the tapping, rhythmic, persistent. At 6 a.m., the day shift arrived. I left without explaining. I went home exhausted and slept. That night I returned. I had to. It was my job. I avoided the glass. I conducted checks by opening doors. But during my midnight round, I passed a corridor mirror, one of the old fixtures that hadn't been replaced. My reflection was wrong. I was wearing blue scrubs. My reflection was wearing white. A patient gown. I stepped closer. My reflection's wrist had a hospital ID band. I looked at my own wrist. No band. In the mirror, the reflection pointed behind me. I turned. The corridor was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was gone. In its place was a view of a different corridor, one I didn't recognize. Older, institutional. The walls were pale green, the floor cracked linoleum. I saw someone walking down that corridor. A nurse. She looked exhausted, lost. She looked like me. I reached out and touched the mirror. It was cold. My fingers left condensation on the glass, and then I saw them. Other figures walking through that other corridor. Dozens of them, all wearing hospital gowns, all looking around, confused. One of them saw me. She walked up to the mirror and pressed her palm against it. She mouthed, "We're still here." I pulled my hand back. The mirror returned to normal. My reflection, in blue scrubs, staring at me. But my reflection's eyes were different. Hollow. Pleading. I left the corridor. I went to the administrative office and pulled the construction files for the renovation. The glass had been sourced from a salvage company. Reclaimed materials from a closed psychiatric facility, Fairview Asylum, shut down in 1987 after allegations of patient abuse and neglect. The reflective panels had been original observation windows. One-way glass. Patients could see their reflections. Staff could observe from the other side, but the report said something else. Patients at Fairview had claimed the glass showed them others, people who weren't in the room. Reflections that didn't match. Staff had dismissed it as psychosis. Until staff started seeing the same things. The asylum was evacuated. The building condemned. The glass salvaged and sold, and now it was here. I checked the patient records for room 4, Mr. DeWitt. Admission date, October 2023. Diagnosis, delusional disorder. Presenting complaint, belief that he is trapped on the wrong side of a mirror. I checked room 7, Mr. Calloway. Diagnosis, dissociative amnesia. Presenting complaint, claims he used to work at a hospital but woke up as a patient. I checked my own employee file. Hired, September 2023. But I remembered 8 years. I remembered my training, my orientation, my patients. I checked the staff photo archive. I found pictures from 5 years ago. 10 years ago, I wasn't in any of them. I looked at the mirror on the office wall. My reflection wore a patient gown now. The ID band on my wrist read, Daly Catherine, patient 1047. I walked back to the ward. I stood in front of the new reflective glass. On the other side, I saw nurses walking past. Real nurses, checking rooms, writing notes. One of them stopped and looked at my room. She made a note on her clipboard. She didn't see me. She just saw a patient. Sleeping, I pounded on the glass. She didn't react. I screamed. Nothing. I turned around. The room behind me was small, institutional, a bed, a sink, a door with a small window. I walked to the door. It was locked. Through the window, I saw a corridor. The pale green walls, the cracked linoleum, and dozens of others, all wearing gowns, all wandering, all confused. One of them saw me and walked over. She smiled sadly. "You'll get used to it. We all do." "Used to what?" "Being on this side. It's not so bad. You just forget eventually." "Forget what?" "That you used to be the one looking in." I turned back to the glass. On the other side, the nurse had moved on. The ward continued its routine, and my reflection stayed here, trapped, because the glass doesn't just reflect. It swaps, and once you're on the wrong side, you can't get back. You just become part of what the next person sees. A reflection that doesn't match, a figure that waves from the wrong side of the glass. Some days, I remember being Nurse Daly. Most days I don't. But when I see someone new arrive, confused, insisting they're staff, I try to help them understand, because the ward is always hiring, always replacing, and the glass never runs out of reflections. The case file for patient 219 was marked with my initials. The date was October 31st, 1994, but I wasn't born until 1997, and every staff member listed in the file had disappeared. Began my psychiatry internship at Ridgecrest State Hospital in July. It's an old facility, built in the 1950s. expanded in the 70s and largely unchanged since. The building has that institutional permanence. Thick walls, narrow windows, floors that echo with every footstep. My rotation was in forensic psychiatry, working under Dr. Ellison, a veteran clinician with 30 years of experience. Part of my training involved reviewing historical case files. Dr. Ellison believed that studying past cases, particularly those with complex diagnostic and treatment challenges, helped interns develop clinical intuition. He assigned me to the archives, a basement room filled with filing cabinets and decades of paper records. Most of the files were routine. Admission notes, treatment plans, discharge summaries. But in mid-October, I found a locked cabinet. It was tucked in the back corner, separate from the others. The label read, "Restricted, administrative access only." I asked Dr. Ellison about it. He frowned. I forgot that was still here. It's old administrative files. Disciplinary records, incident reports. Nothing relevant to your training. But I was curious. "Can I take a look?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I suppose. Just don't remove anything. And if you find something sensitive, let me know." He gave me the key. I opened the cabinet that evening after my shift. Inside were files organized by year, dating back to the 1960s. Most were personnel files, budget reports, incident logs. But at the back, I found a thin folder labeled Patient 219, October 1994. The name was redacted. Black marker obscured every instance of the patient's name throughout the file, but the details were intact. Admission date, October 31st, 1994. Presenting complaint, acute psychotic episode. Patient found unresponsive in hospital staff lounge. No memory of preceding 48 hours. Disoriented, non-communicative. Admitting physician, Dr. Harold Renner. I continued reading. The patient had been a staff member, employee records attached. Position, psychiatric intern. The file included therapy session notes, medication logs, and psychological evaluations. Session note, November 3rd, 1994, Dr. Harold Renner. Patient remains disoriented. Claims to have no memory of Halloween night. Repeatedly asks for the others. When questioned, patient states, "They were with me." "Where are they?" Unable to identify who they refers to. Recommend continued observation. Session note, November 10th, 1994, Dr. Harold Renner. Patient exhibiting improved cognition but fixated on specific date, October 31st. Insists something happened that night involving patient 219. When informed that they are patient 219, patient becomes agitated. States, "I wasn't the patient. I was reviewing the file." I paused. That was strange. The patient had been reviewing their own file. I continued reading. Session note, November 18th, 1994, Dr. Evelyn Marsh. Dr. Renner has requested leave for personal reasons. Assuming treatment of patient 219, patient continues to reference the file and insists they were conducting archival research when they became trapped. Delusional content remains fixed. Medication adjustments ongoing. I noticed the note was written by a different doctor. I flipped ahead. Session note, November 22nd, 1994, Dr. Evelyn Marsh. Patient 219 discharged to outpatient care. Symptom resolution sufficient for release. Recommend follow-up in 6 months. Patient has agreed to avoid archival work. That was the last entry. The file ended abruptly, but at the bottom of the page someone had written in pen, "See Incident Report, IR 119431. I searched the cabinet for the incident report. It was filed separately, dated November 30th, 1994. Incident Report, IR 119431. On November 30th, 1994, Dr. Evelyn Marsh failed to report for her scheduled shift. Security conducted a wellness check at her residence. Dr. Marsh was not found. Her vehicle remained in the hospital parking lot. Personal effects were located in her office, including her ID badge and keys. No signs of foul play. Case referred to local police. Status, missing person. I stared at the report. Dr. Marsh had vanished. I checked the personnel files. Dr. Harold Renner, the original treating physician, had resigned on November 9th, 1994. No forwarding address. No explanation. Both doctors who treated patient 219 had disappeared. I kept reading. At the back of the file was a handwritten note on a torn piece of paper, dated November 29th, 1994. If you're reading this, stop. Do not continue reviewing patient 219's file. It's not a file. It's a loop. I don't know how it works, but everyone who reviews this case becomes part of it. I'm writing this before I forget. I think I'm next. My name is Evelyn Marsh. I was a psychiatrist. I was treating a patient who claimed to be a psychiatrist, reviewing a file about a patient who claimed to be a psychiatrist. I didn't believe them. Now I understand. The file doesn't document a patient. It creates one. Please, stop reading. The note ended there. My hands were shaking. I closed the file and returned it to the cabinet. I locked it and left the archives. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the note, the loop, the disappearances. The next morning, I asked Dr. Ellison about Dr. Renner and Dr. Marsh. He looked uncomfortable. Where did you hear those names? The restricted files. They both worked here in the 90s. Both disappeared, he sighed. That was a long time ago. Before my time, actually. I know Dr. Marsh's case was never solved. Dr. Renner, I think he relocated. Why are you asking? I found a file. Patient 219. Both of them treated the patient, and then they vanished. Dr. Ellison's expression darkened. Close that cabinet. Don't go back to those files. Why? Because some cases don't close. They just continue. Patient 219 is one of them. Every few years, someone finds that file, and then they disappear. Or they become patients themselves. I don't know which. Just stay away from it. But I couldn't. That night I returned to the archives. I opened the cabinet and pulled the file again. This time there was an additional note at the back, handwritten, recent. If you're reading this, you're already part of the loop. Check the admission date. Check the initials. I flipped to the admission page. The initials of the admitting intern, partially redacted but still visible. K.A.S. my initials. Caitlin Ann Sellers, I checked the date again. October 31st, 1994. I was born in 1997. I flipped through the rest of the file. Every session note, every medication log, every evaluation. My initials appeared in the margins, as if I'd been the one documenting the case. But that was impossible. I checked the employee photo attached to the patient's file. It was redacted, black marker over the face. But the ID number was visible. In 2024-19, my ID number. I dropped the file. I backed away from the cabinet. My phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Ellison. Caitlin, are you okay? You didn't show up for rounds this morning. I checked the time. 9:47 a.m. I was supposed to be at rounds at 8, but it was nighttime. I was in the archives. It was 11:30 p.m. I looked at my phone again. The date, October 31st, but yesterday was October 28th. I ran out of the archives. The hospital hallways were empty. The lights were dimmed for night mode. I found the nurse's station. What day is it? I asked the nurse on duty. She looked at me, concerned. October 31st. Are you okay, Dr. Sellers? What time is it? Just after midnight. I checked my badge. My photo. My name. Caitlin Sellers. Psychiatric intern, but when I looked closer beneath my name, in small print, patient ID, 219. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. The most recent message was from Dr. Ellison, dated November 3rd, 2023. Caitlin, I hope you're feeling better. I've assigned Dr. Foster to oversee your treatment. We'll get through this. Please focus on recovery. I scrolled further. Another email from Dr. Foster, dated November 10th. Caitlin, you're making progress. But you need to stop asking about the file. There is no file. You're the patient. You've been here since October 31st. Please trust the process. I didn't remember any of this. I didn't remember being admitted. I didn't remember being treated, but the emails were there. Dozens of them, documenting my treatment, my delusions. My belief that I was an intern reviewing a case file. I ran back to the archives. The cabinet was open. The file was on the floor. I picked it up. The patient's name was no longer redacted, Caitlin Ann Sellers. The admission note read, Psychiatric intern found unresponsive in archives on October 31st, 2023. No memory of preceding 48 hours. Disoriented. Insists she is reviewing a case file and is not a patient. Presenting complaint. Acute dissociative episode. Recommend hospitalization and observation. I turned to the last page. A handwritten note, dated today. If you're reading this, you've completed the loop. You are now patient 219. You will forget this soon. You will believe you are a staff member again. And in a few years, another intern will find this file, and the loop will continue. I'm sorry. I don't know how to stop it. My name was Caitlin Sellers. I was an intern. I was reviewing a file, and now I'm the file. The note was in my handwriting. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. Dr. Ellison stood in the doorway. "Caitlin, you need to come with me." "You're not supposed to be down here." "I'm not a patient," I said. "I'm an intern. I work here." He smiled sadly. "I know you believe that, but we've been through this. You've been a patient for 3 weeks. You were admitted on Halloween. You were found in the archives, reading a file. You've been insisting your staff ever since." "No, that's not. Come on. Let's get you back to your room." I looked at my reflection in the glass door of the cabinet. I was wearing a hospital gown. Not scrubs. I looked at my wrist. An ID bracelet, patient 219, Sellers. Dr. Ellison gently took my arm. "It's okay. We'll get through this." I let him lead me out of the archives, up the stairs, down the hallway, to a room I didn't recognize, but when I stepped inside, I saw my belongings. My clothes, my books, a calendar on the wall marked with therapy sessions. I'd been here for weeks. I sat on the bed. Dr. Ellison handed me a pill cup. "This will help you sleep. Tomorrow, we'll continue working on your recovery." I took the pills. I swallowed them. He closed the door. I heard the lock click. I lay down. The room felt familiar now, and as I drifted off, I remembered. I'd been here before, last year, and the year before that. I was patient 219. I always had been. The file wasn't something I found. It was something I became. And tomorrow, I'd wake up believing I was an intern again, and the loop would start over. Because some files don't close. They just add new entries, new initials, new people who think they're reading about someone else, until they realize they're reading about themselves. The intercom transmission came through at 3:13 a.m. All clear. I checked the control room. No one was there. But when I played back the audio file, I heard my own voice, and the timestamp was October 31st, 2022, a year before I started working here. I'm a hospital systems technician at Greystone Psychiatric Center. My job involves maintaining the building's communication infrastructure, intercoms, nurse call systems, electronic door locks, fire alarms. I've been in this line of work for 12 years, but I only started at Greystone this past summer. The facility is old but functional. The intercom system, installed in the early 2000s, is reliable. Each unit has wall-mounted stations that connect to a central control room on the ground floor. Staff can broadcast announcements, issue alerts, or communicate between floors. The system logs every transmission, time, origin point, duration. In mid-October, the night shift staff reported a recurring anomaly. Every night at 3:13 a.m., the intercom crackled to life, and a voice transmitted the same 2 words. All clear. No one recognized the voice. And no one was logged into the control room at that hour. The first time I investigated, I reviewed the transmission logs. The entry was there, 3:13 a.m., origin point listed as control room, main panel, but the access log showed no one had entered the room. The door requires a key card, and the security system confirmed it hadn't been opened. I assumed it was a pre-recorded message, some automated check-in protocol I wasn't aware of. I asked the previous technician, my predecessor who'd left the position in June, if he'd set up any automated systems. He said no. He didn't remember anything like that. I decided to monitor the system myself. On October 23rd, I stayed overnight sitting in the control room. At 3:10 a.m., I prepared to observe. At exactly 3:13 a.m., the intercom panel lit up. The transmit light activated, and the voice came through the speakers calm and measured. All clear. I stared at the panel. No one had pressed the button. No one was near the microphone. I checked the transmission log. It recorded the event. Origin, control room. Duration, 2 seconds. I played back the audio file stored in the system. The voice was clear, male, familiar. Somehow, though I couldn't place it, I reported the issue to hospital administration. They suggested it might be electromagnetic interference or a software glitch. They authorized a full system diagnostic. Over the next 2 days, I tore apart the intercom system. I checked wiring, replaced circuit boards, updated firmware. Everything tested normal, but the transmission continued. Every night, 3:13 a.m. All clear. On October 30th, I decided to trace the audio file's origin. Digital intercom systems store recordings with metadata, timestamps, device IDs, user credentials. I pulled the file from the server and examined its properties. The timestamp was October 31st, 2022, a year ago, but the transmission had occurred last night. October 30th, 2023. I checked the file's creation date. October 31st, 2022, 3:13 a.m. It was a recording from a year ago, somehow playing back every night at the exact same time. I dug deeper into the archives. I searched for all transmissions from October 31st, 2022. There were dozens. Routine announcements, emergency drills, and then at 3:13 a.m., the all clear message. I played the original file. The voice said, all clear, and then, barely audible, a second voice in the background. Is anyone there? I isolated the background audio and amplified it. The second voice repeated, is anyone there? Can you hear me? It was desperate, frightened. I checked the access logs from that night, October 31st, 2022. Someone had been in the control room at 3:13 a.m., employee. ID J. Harding. I didn't recognize the name. I checked the personnel directory. No one named J. Harding currently worked at Greystone. I contacted HR. They found the file. Jacob Harding, systems technician. Hired 2018, employment ended October 31st, 2022. Status, deceased. I felt cold. What happened? The HR rep hesitated. He died on site. Cardiac event. He was found in the control room on the morning of November 1st. He'd been working the overnight shift. I stared at the file. What time did he die? The coroner estimated sometime between 3 and 4 a.m. I pulled up the transmission again. I listened to the background voice. Is anyone there? Can you hear me? It was him, Jacob Harding, calling for help, but the only thing that transmitted was all clear. I checked the system logs from that night. At 3:13 a.m., Harding had activated the intercom, but the message that went out wasn't what he'd said. The system had overridden his words, replaced them with all clear, and now, every year at the exact moment of his death, the system replayed that message. But why? I stayed in the control room that night, Halloween. I wanted to be there when the transmission occurred. Maybe I could stop it. Maybe I could override it. At 3:10 a.m., I sat at the panel watching the clock. At 3:13 a.m., the transmit light activated. I heard the voice through the speakers. All clear. And then, faintly beneath it, is anyone there? I grabbed the microphone. I'm here. I can hear you. The voice responded immediately. Help me, please. I can't breathe. Something's wrong. My heart pounded. Where are you? Control room. I'm in the control room. I need help. I looked around. I was alone. I'm in the control room, I said. You're not here. Yes, I am. I'm right here. Why can't you see me? I checked the security camera feed. The control room was empty except for me. Jacob? I said. Is this Jacob Harding? A long pause. Then, yes, how do you know my name? Jacob, you died a year ago. You're not here anymore. No, I just sat down. I was monitoring the system. I felt chest pain. I called for help, but no one came. Because the system didn't transmit your message. It only sent all clear. What? No, I said I needed help. I pressed the button. I spoke into the microphone. I know, but the system changed it. It overrode your words. The voice became frantic. Then how do I get help? I can't move. I can't breathe. Please, send someone. Jacob, there's no one to send. You died. This is a recording. A loop. No, I'm here. Right now. I need help. I didn't know what to say. I looked at the timestamp on the transmission log. It showed October 31st, 2022, 3:13 a.m. The system wasn't playing back a recording. It was replaying the moment, trapping him in that instant, over and over. Jacob, listen to me. You need to let go. You're stuck. The system is holding you here. I don't understand. The intercom, it recorded your death. And now it's replaying it every year. You're not calling for help anymore. You're just echoing. A long silence. Then, if I let go, will I die? You already did. A year ago. I'm sorry. Another silence. Then quieter. I remember now. The pain. I couldn't breathe. I tried to call out, but no one came. And then, nothing. You've been repeating that moment ever since. How do I stop? I looked at the panel. I think you have to stop transmitting. You have to let the message end. But if I stop calling, no one will hear me. Jacob, no one's been hearing you. Only all clear. Your real message never got through. I heard him breathing, or the memory of breathing, through the speaker. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, I'll stop." The transmission ended. The transmit light went dark. I waited. Silence. At 3:14 a.m., the intercom remained quiet. I checked the log. The last transmission, 3:13 a.m., October 31st, 2022. Duration, 2 seconds. Message, all clear, no further entries. The next night, I stayed again. 3:13 a.m. came and went. No transmission. The loop had ended. But last week I noticed something. I was reviewing system logs for routine maintenance, and I saw a new entry. October 31st, 2023, 3:13 a.m., Origin Control Room. Message, all clear. My breath caught. I played the file. I heard my own voice. All clear, and in the background faint but unmistakable. Is anyone there? I checked the access logs. Someone had been in the control room at 3:13 a.m. on Halloween. Employee ID, M. Torres, my ID. But I don't remember being here at 3:13 a.m. I left at midnight. I went home, except the log insists I was here, and the recording is my voice. I think I understand now. The system doesn't just replay the dead. It records the moment before you realize you've joined them, and next year, someone else will sit in this room at 3:13 a.m. listening to my voice say, all clear, and wondering why I didn't call for help. Because I did. I am, right now. But the system only lets one message through, and it's never the one you need to send. There were 7 chairs in my therapy circle, 6 patients, and 1 person I couldn't remember admitting. But when I counted, there were always 7 people sitting. And when I reviewed the video, I saw myself in that extra chair, speaking words I didn't remember saying. I'm a licensed therapist at Clearview Psychiatric Hospital. I specialize in group therapy, specifically cognitive behavioral therapy for patients with trauma-related disorders. I facilitated the same Wednesday evening group for 3 years. 6 patients, same faces, rotating depending on admission and discharge schedules. The group is structured, predictable, and therapeutic. Or it was until mid-October. I noticed the extra chair during our October 18th session. I'd arranged 6 chairs in a circle as always, 1 for each patient and 1 for me. But when I entered the room, there were 7. I counted them. 7 chairs. I checked the session roster. 6 patients confirmed for attendance. I assumed a staff member had accidentally added a chair during a previous group. I removed it and stacked it in the corner. The session proceeded normally. We discussed coping mechanisms, processed difficult emotions, practiced grounding techniques. Standard protocol. At the end of the session, I conducted my usual head count as patients filed out. 7 people stood to leave. I stopped. Wait, count off, please? The patients looked at me confused. One by one, they counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 patients. Same as always. But I'd seen 7 people stand. I dismissed the group and checked the room. Empty. I recounted the chairs. 6. I told myself I'd miscounted. Fatigue. Stress. The following week, October 25th, I arranged 6 chairs again. When patients arrived, I counted them as they entered. 6 people, 6 chairs. We began the session. I led the opening discussion, inviting each patient to share their progress from the past week. One by one, they spoke. I facilitated, asked follow-up questions, provided feedback. Then I turned to my left, to the chair I hadn't set up. The 7th chair. It was occupied. A figure sat there, slouched slightly, face obscured by shadow despite the room's bright overhead lights. I couldn't make out details, gender, age, features. Just a vague human shape. I stared. None of the other patients reacted. They continued speaking, as if the figure weren't there. Excuse me, I said, interrupting the group. I don't believe we've met. What's your name? The patients looked at me, puzzled. Dr. Voss, one asked. Who are you talking to? I pointed at the 7th chair. The person sitting right there. They followed my gaze. There's no one there, Dr. Voss. That chair's empty. I looked again. The figure was still there, sitting, silent, watching me. You don't see anyone. They shook their heads. I felt a wave of dizziness. I stood, walked over to the chair, and reached out. My hand passed through empty air. No resistance. But visually, the figure remained. I sat back down. I apologize. Let's continue. The session ended. I I didn't mention the figure again, but as patients left, I watched the seventh chair. The figure stood and walked out with them. No one else reacted. After everyone left, I checked the security recording. We record all therapy sessions for quality assurance and legal documentation. I pulled up the footage from that day. On the screen, I saw myself and 6 patients, and in the seventh chair, a blurred shape. The video couldn't focus on it. Every time the camera angle shifted toward that chair, the image pixelated, distorted, but the audio was clear. I heard my voice facilitating the session, and then, at the 30-minute mark, a second voice, mine, but different, slower, began speaking. It said, "I remember the first time I realized I wasn't helping them. I was helping myself. I needed them to stay broken so I could feel useful." I froze the video. I didn't remember saying that. But the audio timestamp matched the session, and the voice was unmistakably mine. I played it again. The second voice continued. "Every week I sit here and listen to their pain, and I feel relief. Because if they're suffering, I'm not. If they're broken, I'm whole. But what happens when they heal? What happens when they don't need me anymore?" The other patients in the recording didn't react. They continued their own discussion, overlapping with the second voice. It was as if the voice were speaking on a different frequency, audible only on the recording. I fast-forwarded. At the 50-minute mark, the second voice said, "I think I've been a patient longer than I've been a therapist. I just forgot which chair I'm supposed to sit in." The session ended. I watched myself dismiss the group. And then, on the recording, I saw something that made my chest tighten. After the patients left, I stood, but my reflection in the glass door stayed seated in the seventh chair, and that reflection turned toward the camera and smiled. I shut off the recording. That night, I pulled my personnel file. I checked my hire date, my credentials, my performance reviews. Everything was in order. I'd been a therapist here for 3 years. Licensed, experienced, no gaps in my employment. But I found something strange in my medical records. I'd been a patient at Clearview before I was staff. Admission date, October 2017. Duration, 6 months. Diagnosis, unresolved trauma with dissociative features. Discharge summary. Patient demonstrates significant improvement. Recommended for peer support training and potential employment in therapeutic setting. Patient expresses strong desire to give back and help others. I'd been hired 6 months after discharge. As a therapist, I didn't remember being a patient. I remembered graduate school, my internship, my licensure, but there was a gap, late 2016 through mid-2017, that I couldn't quite account for. The following Wednesday, November 1st, I returned to the group. I set up 6 chairs. I waited for patients to arrive. They did. 6 patients. They sat down. I looked at the circle. 7 chairs. The figure was in the 7th chair again. But this time I could see more clearly. It was me, not a reflection, not a shadow. Me, wearing the same clothes, same hairstyle, same posture. I smiled at me. I tried to speak. My voice caught. The other patients began their check-ins. I couldn't focus. I kept staring at the figure, at myself, sitting in the 7th chair. Halfway through the session, the figure spoke. Out loud. The patients didn't react, but I heard her clearly. "You still don't remember, do you?" I shook my head. "You never left, Natalie. You never discharged. You just started sitting in a different chair." "That's not true. I'm the therapist. I work here. You work here because you're still a patient. They let you facilitate groups as part of your treatment. It gives you purpose. But you're not licensed. You're not staff. You're in a role-play program." I looked at the other patients. They continued talking, oblivious. "Why don't they see you?" I asked. "Because I'm not here for them." "I'm here for you. I'm the part of you that knows the truth. The part you keep sitting in the corner, hoping no one notices." I stood up. "I'm ending the session." The patients looked at me, startled. "But we're only halfway through." "I'm sorry. We'll resume next week," they filed out, confused. I remained staring at the 7th chair. The figure, my double, stood. She walked over to me. "Next week," she said, "you'll sit in my chair, and I'll sit in yours, and then you'll understand." She walked past me and out the door. The following Wednesday, I arrived early. I set up 6 chairs. No 7th chair appeared. The patients arrived. I counted them, 6. We sat down. I began the session, but as I spoke, I noticed something. I wasn't sitting in my usual chair. I was sitting in the spot where the 7th chair had been, and across from me, facilitating the group, was another version of me. She smiled at me. "Welcome back, Natalie. How are you feeling today?" I opened my mouth to respond, but one of the other patients spoke first. "Dr. Voss, I've been working on the grounding techniques you suggested." Dr. Voss, my double, nodded and took notes. The session continued. I tried to stand. I couldn't. I tried to speak. My voice wouldn't come. I was a patient again, sitting in the circle, listening. And the therapist, the version of me I'd been a week ago, led the group with calm professionalism. At the end of the session, she looked at me. "Natalie, you've been very quiet today. Would you like to share anything?" I shook my head. She smiled. "That's okay. There's always next week." The patient stood and left. I stood with them. I walked out of the room. In the hallway, I saw my reflection in a window. I was wearing a patient gown. I checked my wrist. An ID bracelet, Voss, Natalie, patient. I walked to the nurse's station. "Excuse me, when is my next therapy session?" The nurse checked her computer. "You have group therapy every Wednesday at 6 p.m. with Dr. Voss." "I am Dr. Voss." She gave me a sympathetic smile. "I know it's confusing, Natalie, but you're doing really well in the role-play program. Dr. Voss says you're making great progress." I walked back to my room. My name was on the door. Inside on the desk was a notebook. I opened it. The pages were filled with my handwriting. Session notes, therapy plans, patient observations, all written from the perspective of a patient pretending to be a therapist. Because the best way to heal, they told me, is to become the person who could have saved you. And every week, I sit in that circle believing I'm the one helping others. But I'm the one who never left. I just changed chairs. I held his hand and told him everything would be okay. His heart rate monitor synced with my pulse. When I tried to let go, my hand wouldn't move. By morning, my badge said, patient, and bed 4 was marked, discharged Hall, Rebecca. I've been a nurse at Riverside General's Psychiatric Intensive Care Unit for 9 years. The PICU handles the most acute cases, patients in catatonic states, those recovering from severe psychotic breaks, individuals under heavy sedation following suicide attempts. It's demanding work, but I find meaning in it. Caring for people who can't care for themselves feels like the purest form of nursing. Bed 4 has been occupied by the same patient for as long as I've worked here. No name, no family, no identification. He was found unresponsive in a bus station 9 years ago and brought to our ER. Brain activity present, but no consciousness. He's been in a vegetative state ever since. We call him Bed 4 because that's his permanent assignment. Over the years, I've cared for him countless times, turning him to prevent bed sores, checking his feeding tube, monitoring vitals. He never responds. His eyes remain closed. His body is maintained by machines, but I talk to him anyway. I tell him about my day, about the weather, about small funny things that happen on the ward. The doctors say it doesn't matter. He can't hear me. But I like to think some part of him knows he's not alone. On Halloween night, I worked a double shift. By the time I finished, it was nearly 3 a.m. The ward was quiet. Most patients were asleep. I was exhausted, but I decided to stop by Bed 4 before I left. I entered his room. The machines beeped their steady rhythm. His chest rose and fell with the ventilator. I checked his vitals on the monitor. Stable. I sat down beside his bed. "Hey, it's me again. Rebecca, long night. I'm tired. You're probably tired too, huh?" Well, not in the same way, but still. I took his hand. It was cool, limp. I held it gently, the way I always did. "I know you can't hear me, but I hope wherever you are, you're not alone. I hope someone's talking to you the way I am now." I closed my eyes for a moment just to rest them. When I opened them, the heart rate monitor had changed. It was beeping faster. I looked at the screen. His heart rate, 78 BPM. I looked at my own pulse on the fitness tracker on my wrist, 78 BPM. I frowned. Coincidence. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. My pulse slowed, 72 BPM. The monitor changed. His heart rate, 72 BPM. I stared. That wasn't possible. I let go of his hand and stood up. The monitor flatlined. I gasped and reached for the call button, but before I could press it, the monitor beeped back to life. Heart rate, 78 BPM. My current pulse. I backed away from the bed. His hand lay on the sheets where I'd released it. But I could still feel the pressure of it in my palm. as if I were still holding it. I looked at my hand. There was a faint red mark across my palm, like I'd been gripping something too tightly. I left the room quickly, my heart pounding. I told myself it was exhaustion, a system glitch. I went to the break room, drank some water, and tried to calm down. At 6 a.m., I clocked out. I went home, showered, and collapsed into bed. I dreamed I was in a hospital room. White walls, machines beeping. I was lying in a bed and someone was holding my hand. A voice said, "Hey, it's me again. Rebecca, you're going to be okay." I tried to open my eyes. I couldn't. I tried to move. I couldn't. The voice continued, "I know you can't hear me, but I'm here. You're not alone." I woke up gasping. My alarm was ringing. It was 6 p.m., time for my next shift. I showered, dressed, and drove to the hospital. Everything felt normal. But as I walked through the entrance, the security guard stopped me. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can I see your ID?" I pulled out my badge and handed it to him. He scanned it and frowned. "This badge is registered as inpatient. You'll need to get a new one from administration." "What?" "No, that's my staff badge. I'm a nurse here." He handed it back. "The system says otherwise. Check with admin." I looked at the badge. My photo, my name, but beneath it, where it should say RNPQ, it read Patient PQ. I walked quickly to the administrative office. "There's a problem with my badge. It says I'm a patient." The clerk checked her system. "Rebecca Hall?" "Yes." She scrolled through her screen.
According to our records, you were admitted to PICU on October 31st. Status, inpatient. That's wrong.
"I worked a shift last night. I'm a nurse. I've worked here for 9 years." She frowned. "Let me check further," she typed. Then her expression changed. "I see. You were employed here until October 31st. Your status changed that day. It says here you were admitted after a workplace incident." "What incident?" "It doesn't specify, but your medical chart shows you're currently in PICU." My pulse raced. "Which bed?" She checked. "Bed 4. I ran. I sprinted through the hallways to the PICU. Staff called after me, but I didn't stop. I reached bed 4 and threw open the door. The bed was occupied. A woman lay there, eyes closed, ventilator breathing for her. I stepped closer. It was me. I saw my own face, pale and still, connected to machines. The monitor showed my heart rate, my blood pressure, my oxygen saturation. I looked at my hands. They were solid, real. I was standing here, but the woman in the bed was also me. I heard footsteps behind me. A nurse entered, someone I'd worked with for years. Her name was Claire. "Rebecca, you shouldn't be out of bed," she said gently. "Claire, it's me. I'm awake. I'm right here." She smiled sadly. "I know, sweetheart. You're doing so well, but you need to rest. Let's get you back to bed. I'm not the patient. I'm a nurse. I work here." She nodded, humoring me. "I know you think that. The doctors say it's part of your condition. You've been experiencing dissociative episodes. You believe you're working here, but you're actually in PICU. You've been here since Halloween." "No, that's not true. I was here last night. I was caring for bed 4. She gestured to the bed. "You are bed 4, Rebecca." I looked at the bed. The woman, me, was still there, unconscious. "Then who am I?" I whispered. Claire's expression softened. "We're not sure. The doctors think you're having an out-of-body experience. Your consciousness is separating from your body. You wander the ward, believing you're still working. But your body is here, in this bed." I shook my head. "No, I'm real. I can feel everything. I'm standing here. I know it feels that way. But Rebecca, you collapsed on Halloween night. You were found in this room, holding the hand of the patient who used to be in this bed. He woke up, and you didn't. The patient woke up." She nodded. "For the first time in 9 years. He opened his eyes, sat up, and asked where he was. We couldn't believe it, but you collapsed at the same moment. It was like you switched places with him. I felt dizzy." "Where is he now?" "He was discharged this morning. Fully conscious. No memory of the past 9 years, but physically stable. It's a miracle." "What was his name?" She checked the chart on the wall. "He didn't have one. We'd been calling him Bed 4, but after he woke up, he told us his name, Robert Hall." I stared at her. "That's not possible. Rebecca, he said he was your brother. He said he'd been in a coma since a car accident 9 years ago. He said you were driving." I felt the room tilt. "I didn't have a brother. I'd never been in a car accident. But when I tried to remember 9 years ago, the day I started working here, I couldn't. There was a gap, a blank space where memory should be." "Claire, Check the employment records. How long have I worked here? She pulled up the system on the room's computer. Rebecca Hall, hired October 31st, 2014, 9 years ago. And before that? She scrolled. Before that, you were a patient here, admitted after a car accident. Comatose for 3 months. Discharged in October 2014, then hired the same day. I looked at the bed. The woman, me, lay motionless. Who discharged me? I asked. Claire checked. Dr. Raymond Carver. I recognized the name. Dr. Carver, the attending who died last year. Claire, where's Dr. Carver now? He passed away last Halloween. Heart attack during rounds. I remembered that. I'd been there. I'd tried to help him, but now I wondered, had I been there as a nurse? Or as a patient who believed she was a nurse? I looked at my hands again. They were trembling. Claire, what happens if I get back in bed? She smiled gently. Then you wake up. The real you. And this version, the one walking around, disappears. But I don't want to disappear. Rebecca, you're not real. You're a projection, a consciousness without a body. The only way to truly wake up is to reunite with yourself. I looked at the bed, at the woman who was me. What if I don't want to? Claire's expression grew sad. Then you'll keep wandering, believing you're working here, caring for patients, but you'll never leave. You'll be a ghost nurse tending to people who can't see you. I thought about the patient who woke up. Robert Hall, my brother. If he woke up when I collapsed, did that mean I'd taken his place? Had I been the one in the coma all along, dreaming I was a nurse? I reached out and touched the hand of the woman in the bed. My hand. The moment we connected, I felt a jolt, like electricity running through my body. The room spun. I felt myself falling, and then I opened my eyes. I was lying in the bed. Machines beeped around me. Claire stood over me, smiling. Welcome back, Rebecca. I tried to speak. My throat was dry. She gave me water. You've been out for 9 years, she said. But you're awake now. I looked at my hands. They were thin, weak from atrophy. What happened? I whispered. Car accident. You and your brother? He woke up yesterday. You woke up today? I tried to remember. The accident. My brother. But all I could remember was being a nurse. Walking these halls, caring for patients. Was I a nurse here? I asked. Claire shook her head gently. No, sweetheart. You dreamed that. You dreamed you were taking care of others while you were the one who needed care. I looked at the door. Part of me wanted to get up, to walk out, to return to the work I remembered, but I couldn't move. My body was too weak, and somewhere in the back of my mind I wondered, if I was the patient all along, who was the nurse I thought I was? And is she still out there, walking the ward, holding hands with patients who'll never wake up? Because sometimes the person caring for you isn't real. They're just the dream you have when you can't save yourself. I found the candy wrapper on Mrs. Halloran's empty bed at 6:47 a.m. A butterscotch disc wrapped in cellophane, the kind nobody manufactures anymore. Her chart showed she'd been discharged at 2:33 a.m., but I'd been at the nurse's station all night. No one had wheeled her out. I've worked the overnight shift in the geriatric wing of St. Catherine's Regional for 11 years. My name is Dorothy Fletcher, and I pride myself on maintaining meticulous records. Every patient accounted for, every visitor logged, every medication administered on schedule. Halloween shifts are typically quiet. Families keep the elderly home for trick-or-treating with grandchildren, and our census drops. That October 31st, we had 42 patients across 3 floors. I knew each of their names. The evening had progressed normally. I'd completed my 10 p.m. rounds, checked vitals, ensured call buttons were within reach. Mr. Pemberton in 302 needed his morphine drip adjusted. Ms. Chen in 318 wanted her television volume lowered. Routine, predictable, safe. At 11:47 p.m., I heard singing in the south stairwell. Not the jarring kind that makes you jump. Soft, melodic, almost like a lullaby. Multiple voices harmonizing "You Are My Sunshine" with practiced precision. I assumed it was staff from pediatrics passing through, though our wings don't typically overlap. I made a note to remind them about quiet hours, but didn't investigate immediately. I had medication rounds to complete by 12:15 a.m. The singing had moved to our floor. I looked up from my computer to see them emerging from the elevator. A group of 12 people wearing burgundy smocks with white Peter Pan collars. The fabric looked heavy, institutional. Embroidered over each breast pocket was St. Catherine's original logo, a stylized cross wrapped in thorns that the hospital had replaced in 1974 with something more modern, more welcoming. I'd only seen that old symbol in archived photographs in the administrator's office. They carried wicker baskets filled with wrapped candies and wore cheerful expressions. The woman leading them, middle-aged, with gray hair pinned in victory rolls, approached my station with a warm smile. "Good evening, Nurse Fletcher," she said, reading my name badge. "We're the hospital's volunteer corps, here for our annual Halloween rounds. We won't disturb anyone who's sleeping, just a little cheer for those who are awake." I opened the visitor log. "I don't have you scheduled. Who authorized this?" "Oh, we've been coming for years," she said, her smile never wavering. "It's tradition. Director Morrison always approves it. There hadn't been a Director Morrison at St. Catherine's since I was a child. The current administrator was Dr. Patricia Ventura, appointed in 2009. "I'll need to verify with administration," I said, reaching for the phone. "Of course," the woman said pleasantly. "We'll just start with the rooms at the end of the hall while you call." Before I could protest, they dispersed, moving with unsettling synchronization down the corridor, their soft-soled shoes making no sound on the linoleum. I dialed administration. The line rang 14 times. No answer. Security's extension went straight to voicemail. I tried the night supervisor's cell phone. Disconnected. I stood from my chair, intending to follow them, when I noticed the volunteer at the medication cart. He was young, perhaps 19, with neatly combed hair and that same burgundy smock. He was organizing the medication cups I'd just prepared, rearranging them with delicate fingers. When I approached, he looked up with pale gray eyes that seemed to reflect the fluorescent lights like an animal's. "Just helping tidy up," he said softly. "You work so hard. Please don't touch those." I kept my voice level, professional. "Those are controlled substances." "Yes, ma'am." He stepped back, clasping his hands behind him like a schoolboy. "We only want to help." I counted the cups. All accounted for. Nothing disturbed. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Some imperceptible alteration I couldn't identify. Down the hall, I heard them singing again. Mockingbird this time. Voices blending in perfect four-part harmony. I walked toward the sound, checking each room as I passed. In 3 on 10, 2 volunteers sat beside Mr. Pemberton's bed. One held his hand, while the other placed a peppermint on his bedside table. He was sleeping peacefully, but his morphine drip had been turned up slightly. Not dangerously high, just adjusted. "What are you doing?" I asked, my professional calm beginning to fracture. The woman, elderly with clouded eyes, looked up at me with tender sadness. "Providing comfort, dear. That's all we've ever done." I checked the IV line, documented the change, adjusted it back to prescribed levels. When I turned around, both volunteers had vanished. The room's door was closed, though I hadn't heard it shut. By 1:30 a.m., they had visited every room on the floor. I followed them, documenting, verifying, checking on patients. Everyone seemed content. Some were awake and chatting pleasantly with the volunteers, accepting candies wrapped in unfamiliar packaging. Others slept while volunteers sat vigil beside them, humming lullabies in that same eerie harmony. I tried calling security again. This time someone answered, but the voice was distant, staticky, speaking in a cadence that didn't match normal speech patterns. "Everything is proceeding as scheduled," the voice said, then disconnected. At 2:15 a.m., I found the group assembled in the day room, standing in a semicircle around Mrs. Halloran's wheelchair. She was laughing, the first genuine laughter I'd heard from her in months. The lead volunteer was reading from a large leather-bound book, though I couldn't make out the words. They sounded like English, but backward somehow. Syllables reversed. "It's time for Mrs. Halloran to go home," the woman said, looking directly at me. "She's scheduled for discharge Thursday," I replied. "Her daughter is picking her up." "She's ready now." The woman closed the book with a soft thump. "We've come to escort her." Mrs. Halloran wheeled herself toward them, still smiling. "They knew my husband," she said to me. They remembered him. "From before." "Before what?" I asked, but she was already moving down the corridor with the group, their burgundy smocks creating a moving wall around her wheelchair. I followed them to the elevator. Pressed the call button repeatedly. The doors opened and they wheeled Mrs. Halloran inside. 12 volunteers, 1 patient, 1 ancient wheelchair, somehow all fitting comfortably in an elevator designed for 6 people. "Wait." I reached for the door. The lead volunteer turned to me, her smile finally fading. Some people volunteer for service, Nurse Fletcher. Others are volunteered. Mrs. Halloran completed her service tonight. You're still completing yours. The door's closed. The elevator descended. I watched the floor indicator drop from 3 to 2 to 1 to B to nothing. The numbers stopped. The elevator never returned. At 6:47 a.m. during my final rounds, I found Mrs. Halloran's room empty. Her chart showed a discharge timestamp of 2:33 a.m. signed by Dr. Helena Morrison, Director of Voluntary Services. The signature looked fresh. The ink still smelled like fountain pen and formaldehyde. On her bedside table, a butterscotch candy in cellophane. The wrapper printed with St. Catherine's original Thorned Cross logo. I checked the other rooms. Mr. Pemberton, discharged at 2:41 a.m. Ms. Chen, 3:02 a.m. 6 patients total, all released to family escort during hours I'd been awake and watching. The volunteer log from the night before was missing from my station. In its place was a different log, yellowed, brittle, dated October 31st, 1974. My handwriting filled every line, documenting the same night I'd just experienced. Same names, same times, same volunteers. At the bottom of the page, in careful cursive, Dorothy Fletcher, RN, 45th year of service, 6 patients discharged to continuing care. I don't remember writing it. I don't remember 45 years, but I remember the singing. And I know with absolute certainty that next Halloween they'll return. The volunteers always do. And one year, I won't be logging their visits. I'll be wearing burgundy, carrying a basket, remembering names of people who haven't been born yet. Some traditions don't end when the shift is over. Some traditions are the shift, repeating infinitely, recruiting staff who never quite remember when they stopped working for the living. The words were coming from my mouth. I could feel my lips forming each syllable, my throat vibrating with sound. But I wasn't speaking them. And as the chorus of voices swelled around me in that empty ward, I realized with dawning horror that I was answering a call I'd never been trained to hear. My name is Father Marcus Brennan, and I have served as the psychiatric chaplain at Westfield State Hospital for 18 years. My role exists in the liminal space between medicine and faith. I offer communion to Catholic patients, counsel those seeking spiritual guidance, and perform small blessings when requested by staff or families. I am not an exorcist. I do not believe in demons. I believe in trauma, mental illness, and the profound human need for meaning and suffering. When Dr. Venkat, the hospital administrator, called me on November 3rd to request a blessing of E-Ward before its scheduled renovation, I saw it as a purely ceremonial gesture. E-Ward had been closed since 1998, a relic of the hospital's darker past, when psychiatric treatment meant restraints, isolation, and procedures we'd rather forget. The wing was being gutted and converted into administrative offices, and Dr. Venkat thought a blessing might provide positive closure for long-term staff who remembered what had happened there. I agreed without hesitation. I'd performed dozens of such blessings: new wings, renovated surgical suites, memorial gardens. A standard pastoral service, 10 minutes, a few prayers, holy water sprinkled at cardinal points. Routine spiritual hygiene. E-Ward occupied the hospital's northeastern corner, connected to the main building by a single corridor that had been sealed with industrial doors in 1998. Maintenance had unlocked them for me that morning, the hinges shrieking after decades of disuse. The air beyond smelled of mildew, institutional disinfectant, and something else. Something organic and old that made my throat tighten. The ward consisted of 32 patient rooms arranged along 2 parallel hallways converging at a central nursing station. The architecture dated from 1962, designed during the brief period when psychiatric facilities embraced what they called therapeutic modernism. Clean lines, abundant windows, pastel colors meant to promote calm. But decades of neglect had transformed it into something else. Paint peeling in long strips, floor tiles cracked and missing, windows covered with yellowed blinds that filtered daylight into sickly amber. I walked the hall slowly, familiarizing myself with the space. Most doors hung open, revealing empty rooms stripped of furniture. A few remained closed. Maintenance hadn't gotten to them yet, their locks still engaged. In room 17, someone had scratched words into the plaster. They listen when you sleep. In the day room, a wheelchair sat facing the corner, as if someone had just stepped away and forgotten to return. The nursing station would serve as the center point for the blessing. I set down my portable altar kit, a simple case containing a crucifix, candles, holy water, and my prayer book. The station's desk was still intact, though the ancient computer terminal was coated in dust so thick I could write my name in it. Bulletin boards on the walls displayed faded schedules from October 1998. Shift rotations for nurses whose names I didn't recognize. Protocol updates for medications no longer prescribed. I lit the candles, placed them at the four corners of the desk, and opened my prayer book to the blessing of a place. The ritual is straightforward. Invocation of divine presence, scriptural reading, specific blessing prayer, aspersion with holy water, closing benediction. I've performed it hundreds of times. I could recite it from memory. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, I began, making the sign of the cross. My voice sounded small in the empty ward. Absorbed by decades of silence, let us pray. Lord God, you are present in all places and times, sanctifying spaces where your people gather. We ask you now to bless this place. I heard the first echo at bless, not an acoustic echo, those bounce and fade. This was precise, immediate, spoken in perfect simultaneity with my own voice, but coming from somewhere else. Somewhere deeper in the ward, I paused, listened. Silence. I continued, speaking the traditional words. May this place, which has known suffering, be cleansed of all darkness. May those who enter here find peace. This time, multiple voices joined mine. 3, perhaps 4, speaking the exact same words at the exact same moment. Same rhythm, same inflection, as if they were reading from the same script, synchronized perfectly with my speech. I stopped mid-sentence. The voices stopped with me, the final syllable hanging in the air. Hello? I called out. Is someone here? No response. The ward remained still, suspended in amber light. I told myself it was an acoustic phenomenon, some quirk of the empty building, sound bouncing in unexpected ways. Or perhaps maintenance workers in adjacent sections, their conversations carrying through ventilation ducts. Rational explanations, simple explanations. I resumed the prayer, speaking louder now, with more authority. We ask that you drive out all spirits of malice. The voices returned, but this time I heard the wrongness clearly. They were speaking with me, but the words were inverted. Not backward, that would sound like gibberish. Inverted, as if someone had taken each word and reversed its spiritual polarity. Malice became something that sounded like malice but meant protection. Drive out became invitation. Every word I spoke was being translated instantaneously into its opposite, creating a counter prayer that ran parallel to mine. I tried to stop. I intended to stop, but my mouth continued forming words, my voice continuing the prayer independent of my will. The sensation was nauseating, like my body had been hijacked, turned into an instrument playing notes I hadn't chosen. Sanctify this space with your light, I said, while the chorus chanted something that meant darken this space with your presence. I could feel my lips moving, my diaphragm pushing air, my vocal cords vibrating. But I wasn't in control. Someone else was speaking through me, using my voice as a component in a larger liturgy. The candles flickered, flames bending toward the corridor as if pulled by a draft. But there was no draft. The air had gone completely still, heavy, pressing against my skin like water. I tried to close the prayer book. My hands wouldn't obey. They turned the page instead, moving to a section I'd never used. Prayers for the dead, specifically for those who died unconfessed. My finger traced the Latin text while my voice continued speaking English. But the words were no longer from the blessing ceremony. I was reciting something else entirely, something that felt ancient, pre-Christian, words that predated the religion I'd devoted my life to serving. The voices grew louder, more numerous. 10 voices, 20, 50, a full congregation speaking in perfect unison, every word a reflection and inversion of mine. I recognized the cadence now, call and response, liturgical dialogue. Except I wasn't calling, I was answering. The entire time I'd been responding to something that had called first, something that had been calling since long before I'd entered E Ward. My vision began to blur at the edges. The nursing station dissolved, replaced by a different configuration. The same space but occupied, populated by translucent figures in white uniforms. They stood in a circle around me, heads bowed, lips moving in synchronized prayer. Not ghosts, something more solid, more present. Temporal overlays. I was seeing E-Ward as it had been, and they were seeing it as it would be, and we were all occupying the same moment, separated by decades that had become meaningless. I recognized one of the figures, Dr. Helena Marsh, whose photograph hung in the hospital's memorial hallway. She'd been head psychiatrist from 1964 to 1973, died of a stroke in her office. She stood directly across from me, her mouth moving with mine, teaching me the prayer I was speaking. Teaching me the words I'd supposedly come here to say. This was their blessing ceremony. The one they'd performed monthly in E-Ward during its operation. The one that had continued after closure. Repeated every month by staff who were no longer technically alive but still showing up for their shifts. Still providing the care they'd been trained to give, and now I was part of it. Incorporated into the rotation. Another chaplain in an infinite chain, each believing they'd come voluntarily, none understanding they'd been summoned. The prayer reached its conclusion, or rather the section I'd been assigned. My voice fell silent. My hands closed the book. Control returned to my body like circulation returning to a numb limb, painful and disorienting. The figures faded. The candles burned normally. The ward was empty again. I left my supplies and walked quickly toward the exit. Behind me I heard a door close softly, then another. Then 12 more in rapid succession, as if patients were being locked into rooms for evening count. At the sealed corridor, I turned back. E-Ward looked different now, lights on in several windows. Shadows moving behind the yellowed blinds. Occupied. Active. Continuing its operations with or without physical patients. Sustained by a liturgy that predated my church and would outlast it. I reported to Dr. Venkat that the blessing was complete. I wrote in my log, E-Ward blessed and cleared for renovation, November 3rd, 10:45 a.m. Standard documentation. Routine closure. I didn't mention the voices. I didn't mention the prayer I'd learned, the words now lodged in my memory like a tumor. I didn't mention that every night since. At 10:45 p.m., my lips begin moving of their own accord, reciting that inverted liturgy while I sleep. The renovation of E-Ward has been delayed. Structural issues, they say. Foundation problems. But I know the truth. The ward won't be renovated because it's already occupied, already serving its purpose, already being blessed and maintained by staff who never left their posts. And I understand now why the hospital has always kept a psychiatric chaplain on staff, why the position has never been eliminated despite budget cuts. The role isn't about serving patients. It's about maintaining the prayer cycle, ensuring the liturgy continues, providing replacement chaplains when the previous ones complete their term of service. I've served 18 years. Dr. Marsh served 9. I don't know how time is calculated in E-Ward, what constitutes a term when I'll be relieved of duty, but I know I'm still praying, even now, even when I think I'm silent. Some prayers don't require sound. Some prayers don't require awareness. Some prayers are answered before they're spoken, by congregations assembled in places we've sealed off but never truly closed. The blessing is complete. The blessing is ongoing. The blessing was always there, waiting for someone to mouth the words, so it could speak itself into continued existence. Next month, another chaplain will be hired, young, earnest, believing they've chosen this work. And somewhere in their orientation materials, buried in routine documentation, will be a request to bless a section of the hospital before renovation. They'll agree without hesitation. They'll light candles and open a prayer book, and their voice will join ours, expanding the chorus, sustaining the service. We all volunteered for this. We just don't remember when. At 4 Meissen, I watched myself walk past my office door on monitor 3. I was smiling. So was I, the version sitting in the chair watching. Then the screen went dark, and I realized I couldn't remember which one I'd been first. I've been chief resident of the psychiatric ward at Mercy General for 3 years. Halloween nights are predictable. Understaffed, overstimulated patients, and a skeleton crew holding the line until dawn. This year I volunteered to stay late and complete the final observation rounds myself. It seemed reasonable. I'd done it before. The paperwork alone takes hours. and I preferred working when the building settled into that particular 030's outer silence, the kind that feels less like peace and more like held breath. The ward occupies the entire 4th floor. 42 beds, 38 occupied that night. The staff had decorated half-heartedly, paper bats taped to door frames, plastic pumpkins on the nurses' station. By 23, the last nurse had clocked out, leaving me with Gerard, the night security guard, and the usual hum of fluorescent lights. I began my rounds at 23:30. Room 401, Brennan, stable, asleep. Room 402, Colfax, awake but calm, sketching something repetitive in his notebook. Room 403, empty, awaiting transfer. I moved methodically, logging observations on my tablet, checking vitals displayed on the wall monitors outside each room. Everything was routine. Everything was documented. By 0045, I'd finished the patient wing and returned to my office, a narrow room at the corridor's end, lined with filing cabinets and a desk cluttered with incident reports. I sat down to transcribe my notes into the digital system. The office has one window overlooking the parking lot and one door that opens onto the main hallway. I always leave it slightly ajar. Hospital policy. In case of emergency. At ear 112, I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, the soft squeak of hospital-issue shoes on linoleum. I glanced up. The hallway was empty. I assumed Gerard was making his rounds. I returned to typing. At 0134, I heard them again. Closer this time. I stood, leaned into the hallway. Nothing. The corridor stretched in both directions, lit by every third ceiling panel to conserve energy. The nurse's station sat dark at the far end. I called out. No response. I checked the security monitor mounted inside my office, a small screen linked to the ward's 6 cameras. Monitor 1 showed the nurse's station. Monitor 2 showed the patient corridor. Monitor 3 showed the hallway outside my office. On Monitor 3 I saw myself, not live, recorded. A timestamp in the corner read Era 129. I watched myself walk past my own door, glance briefly toward the camera, and continue down the hall. I remembered that moment. I'd done exactly that 5 minutes earlier. The system must have been replaying footage. I made a mental note to mention it to Gerard. At 0203, the footsteps returned. This time, I didn't wait. I stepped into the hallway immediately, empty. I walked to the nurse's station, checked the medication room, the supply closet, the patient wing. Gerard wasn't there. I found him 20 minutes later in the stairwell, asleep in a folding chair, his radio crackling softly beside him. I didn't wake him. I returned to my office. At 0241, I checked the monitor again. Monitor 3 still showed the hallway outside my office. The timestamp now read 0238. I watched myself walk past my door again. Identical posture, identical pace. But I hadn't left my office since 0220. I rewound the footage manually using the control panel. The recording was continuous, no gaps. At 0238, I had walked past my own door while sitting inside my office, watching. I stood, opened the door, and stared down the empty hallway. My mouth felt dry. I checked the patient log. All stable. I checked my watch. 2:47. I sat back down. At 3:08, I saw myself again, this time on monitor 2, walking through the patient corridor, pausing briefly outside room 412, then continuing toward the far exit. The timestamp read 0306. I had not been in the patient corridor since 045. I scrolled back through the footage. There I was, walking, checking doors, logging notes. My movements were precise, professional, unhurried, but I hadn't been there. I called Gerard. No answer. I considered leaving, but the idea felt absurd. I was the senior clinician on duty. I had 42 patient logs to finalize. I forced myself to focus. I told myself it was a technical glitch. Old cameras, looped footage, some artifact of the digital system misinterpreting timestamps. At 0329, I heard my own voice. It came from the hallway. Muffled but unmistakably mine. Calm, clinical, speaking in the measured tone I use during patient assessments. I couldn't make out the words. I opened the door. Silence. I checked monitor 3. The hallway was empty. At 0347, I checked all 6 monitors simultaneously. Monitor 1, nurse's station, empty. Monitor 2, patient corridor, empty. Monitor 4, medication room, empty. Monitor 5, stairwell, Gerard still asleep. Monitor 6, main entrance, locked and dim. Monitor 3, me. Standing in the hallway outside my office, facing the camera. Staring directly into it. The timestamp read 03:47, real time. I was looking at myself in the present moment, but I was sitting in my office staring at the screen. I stood slowly. My legs felt unsteady. I moved to the doorway and looked out. The hallway was empty. I turned back to the monitor. I was still there, standing exactly where I should have been, watching the camera, watching myself. I stepped into the hallway. The air felt colder. I walked to the exact spot I'd seen myself standing. I looked up at the camera. Its red recording light blinked steadily. I returned to my office and checked the monitor. The hallway was empty now. I rewound the footage. At 03:47, I watched myself walk into the hallway, stand beneath the camera, look up, and return to my office. The figure on screen moved exactly as I had, but the angle was wrong. The figure's shadow fell in the opposite direction. At 03:58, I checked monitor 2 again. I was walking through the patient corridor. The timestamp read 03:56. I watched myself stop outside room 428, check the wall monitor, and make a note on my tablet. I had not left my office, but I recognized the gesture, the way I tapped the screen twice before swiping. The exact rhythm I use. I opened my tablet. The log for room 428 had been updated at 03:56. Patient stable. Vitals normal. Observation complete. My name appeared in the signature field. At a 4mo, I looked at monitor 3. I was standing in the hallway again. But this time I wasn't alone. Another version of me stood inside my office, visible through the open door, seated at the desk, staring at the monitor. Both of us were watching the screen. Both of us were still. Then, simultaneously, both versions smiled. It wasn't my smile. It was too wide, too slow. The figure in the hallway tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging something. The figure at the desk leaned closer to the screen. The fluorescent light above monitor 3 flickered once. Twice. The screen went black. I stood in the sudden darkness of my office. The hallway light beyond the door remained steady. I didn't move. I couldn't. My hands were shaking. I looked at my watch. 04:01. The monitor flickered back on. Monitor 3 showed the hallway. Empty. Monitor 2 showed the patient corridor. Empty. Monitor 1 showed the nurse's station. Gerard was there now, awake, yawning, checking his phone. Everything was normal. I opened my patient log. Every room had been checked. Every observation completed. My signature appeared 42 times, time-stamped throughout the night. The final entry was logged at 04:03, 2 minutes in the future. At 04:15, Gerard knocked on my door. He asked if I was ready to clock out. I said yes. He asked if everything had been quiet. I said yes. He mentioned he'd slept through most of his shift, apologized, said it wouldn't happen again. I told him it was fine. As we walked to the elevator, Gerard paused at the nurse's station. He pointed to monitor 3. "Camera's been acting weird," he said. "Keeps showing someone walking the halls. But when I check, nobody's there." I asked him when he first noticed it. "About a month ago," he said. "Always around 4, no. Same guy, same route. Hospital IT says it's old footage looping, but the timestamp's always current." I asked what the person looked like. Gerard shrugged. "Hard to say. Moves like staff. Wears a coat like yours." At 04:32, I left the building. The parking lot was silent. I sat in my car for 11 minutes before starting the engine. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, expecting to see myself standing behind the car, watching. I didn't, but when I checked my phone, I had a new email. Sent from my hospital account. Sent at 04:00. The subject line read, "Final observation complete." The body of the email was empty, except for one line, "Patient 43, stable. Ongoing monitoring required. We only have 42 beds. I haven't returned to the ward since." I submitted my resignation the following week, citing personal reasons. They accepted without question. But sometimes, late at night, I check the hospital's staff directory online. My name is still listed. My office extension's still active, and last week I received another email, sent from my account, time-stamped at 04:00. It contained a single attachment, a surveillance video. I haven't opened it yet, but I know what it shows. Some shifts never really end. The cameras keep recording. The logs keep updating. And somewhere in the space between observation and being observed, the work continues, long after you've clocked out, long after you've convinced yourself you left. Because the hospital always needs someone on duty, and it's very good at making sure there always is.